Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to ancient Rome to attend the kind of festival that made even the most jaded emperors clutch their pearls. Think masks, music, wine that never stops pouring, and rituals so intense they had to be outlawed by the Roman Senate. It's the Bacchanalia, a celebration of chaos, ecstasy, and the boundary between divine and indecent. And yeah, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what time it is where you are and what city you're watching from. I always love seeing where these stories are travelling to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a sound you don't quite recognise. A high, lilting flute, playing somewhere off in the shadows. The air smells like crushed grapes, incense, and something more animal, musky, almost primal. You're barefoot, standing in the middle of a bustling Roman street. But it's not the Rome you know from textbooks. This place is dirtier, more alive. Dolls crowd the stone alleyways, the sky glows a dull gold, and somewhere in the distance, the Tiber rolls along, ancient and unbothered. The locals don't give you a second glance. You're just another body in a city of a million. So you blend in, or try to. You notice something strange right away. Groups of people drifting in the same direction. Some wear plain tunics, others cloaks with hoods pulled low, but they all have one thing in common. Each clutches a wreath of ivy or a small carved mask. Their faces glow with anticipation, or is it fear? You follow them, pulled by curiosity, or maybe something deeper, something older. They lead you to the edge of the city, to a hidden grove half covered by cypress trees. The path narrows. Silence thickens. Someone hands you a goblet of wine, no words exchanged, just a knowing glance. You drink because not drinking feels like the wrong kind of rude. The world begins to hum in a new key. Torches flicker. A woman in a lion-skin cloak steps forward and places a hand on your forehead, muttering a phrase in Greek. You catch only one word, Dionysus. And that's when you realise you're not at a party. You're in a ritual. There's chanting now, low at first, then rising. You're led down a slope into an open glade where dozens, maybe hundreds of people are gathering. Some are dancing in circles, their limbs loose and erratic. Others kneel, whispering prayers into the earth. A young man screams with laughter before collapsing into the arms of another. And above it all, hanging like a second moon, is a wooden effigy of a wild-eyed god with snakes for hair and a grin too wide to be comforting. This is Dionysus, Bacchus to the Romans, god of wine, madness, ecstasy and rebirth. Also god of theatre, which makes sense, because none of this feels real. You've read about him, sure. Maybe in some watered-down high school mythology book where he's painted as the drunk uncle of Olympus. But here, he feels dangerous, beautiful and absolutely in charge, and a flute player slinks past you, their eyes rimmed with kohl and pupils wide with something more than devotion. You hear snatches of Latin and Greek blending together, stories being told in pieces. One woman whispers about seeing visions of panthers dancing in the woods. Another man claims Bacchus gave him the strength to fight off 3 armed thieves with his bare hands. Whether true or not doesn't matter. Faith and frenzy walk hand in hand here. You look up and realise the stars have appeared. How long have you been here? It doesn't matter. Time bends in the Bacchanalia. You notice that people are shedding more than their cloaks. Skin glows in the firelight. Lovers tangle under trees. Some cry, some laugh, some do both at once. You've stepped out of the Roman Republic and into something older. A fertility rite. A blood memory passed down from the wild hills of Thrace and beyond. You remember a fact from somewhere in your mind. The Bacchanalia were originally women-only rites, practiced in secret by devotees of Dionysus who gathered to honour the god in ways society deemed improper. And now men are joining in, though the feminine energy remains thick and electric in the air. Rome may try to control its citizens, but here in the groves, control is the first thing to go. A goat is brought forward. Its eyes are wild, nostrils flaring. You tense. Are they going to sacrifice it? You're not ready for that. But instead it's kissed, adorned with flowers and let loose into the woods. A few followers chase after it, howling with laughter. A ritual of fertility, not death, for now. Nearby, a group sits in a circle, passing a jug of wine and telling stories. One man talks about his wife, who vanished during a Bacchanalia 2 years ago and returned speaking in tongues. Another swears he saw a satyr, goat legs and all. Someone scoffs, but another nods seriously. Here, logic isn't invited. This whole night feels like it shouldn't exist. Like it's too raw, too human, too alive for the cold marble and order of Roman life. And yet here it is, the underside of the empire, a place where class dissolves, gender bends, and divinity dances barefoot in the dirt. You ask someone near you how often this happens. They smile in that slow, knowing way you're starting to recognise. Used to be 3 times a year, they whisper. But now, every other night it seems. You raise an eyebrow. That doesn't seem sustainable. You're right to worry. But for now, the wine flows. The drums pulse, someone hands you a tambourine and a mask. And as you slip it over your face, you feel it happen, the transformation. You're no longer you, you're something else, a worshipper, a reveller, thread in the tapestry of divine madness. And Bacchus is watching. From the shadows, from the stars, from inside your own skin, the mask sticks to your face, not because it's tight, but because it somehow becomes you. It's carved from thin wood, maybe fig or ash, with exaggerated cheekbones and wide, empty eye holes that force you to see the world differently, like it's suddenly pulsing with hidden messages. Everything feels brighter. The torches burn with a redder glow, the flutes sound deeper, and the wind itself starts whispering in a language you don't quite understand. You blink and realise people around you are watching, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet welcome, like you've passed some invisible test. The woman in the lionskin cloak returns. Her name is Albinia, and she introduces herself without ceremony, as if you should have already known it. Her breath smells like honey wine, and her eyes are sharp despite the drink. She leads you away from the centre of the grove and deeper into a vine-covered alcove, where a small shrine flickers with candlelight. At its centre is a small statue of Dionysus. This one less monstrous, more serene. His features youthful, curls tumbling like ivy. One hand holds a cup, the other a thyrsus, a wand crowned with a pine cone, symbol of fertility and divine intoxication. He brings madness, Albinia whispers, almost reverently. But not just the kind you fear, the kind that sets you free. You nod, not entirely sure what she means, but the words settle in your chest like warm coals. Let's pause a second. You might be wondering, how did we even get here? How did this weird, wine-drenched chaos sneak its way into the heart of Rome, a city that prides itself on order, law, and cleanly shaven senators? To understand that, we have to go back a few centuries, to Greece, naturally. Dionysus was a foreign god even to the Greeks, believed by some to come from Thrace, Phrygia, or even the mysterious lands beyond the Black Sea. In myth, he's a latecomer to Olympus, often mistrusted by the other gods because of his strangeness. He's androgynous, emotionally volatile, and constantly surrounded by women. The Maenads, wild female followers who tear animals, and sometimes men, apart during ecstatic frenzies. You remember hearing about the Bacchae in school, maybe? Euripides' brutal little play where a king tries to suppress Dionysus and ends up being dismembered by his own mother, who's so deep in her trance that she mistakes him for a lion. Classic Greek theatre. Blood, wine, and existential dread. But here's the fun part. Dionysus wasn't just about death and madness. He was also about joy, release, and liberation. The wine wasn't just a drink, it was a doorway. When the Greeks colonized southern Italy, they brought their gods with them, and Dionysus slipped in under the radar. The local Italic peoples, like the Oscans and Etruscans, already had their own versions of ecstatic rites, and Dionysus fit in perfectly. Over time he blended, evolved, and rebranded as Bacchus, the Roman name you'll be hearing a lot from now on. What began as fringe worship, mostly practiced by women in secret, eventually morphed into something Rome couldn't ignore. Why? Because it worked. People loved it. The Bacchic rites offered an escape from rigid social roles, from the pressures of Roman decorum. Slaves, women, the poor, everyone marginalised by the Republic's ironclad hierarchies found freedom in Bacchus. You weren't a second-class citizen in the grove, you were a vessel for the god. Now you see why the Senate eventually got nervous. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back in the glade, Albinia offers you a pomegranate seed and tells you it's a symbol of crossing over, a nod to Persephone and the underworld perhaps, or just another excuse to chew on something slightly ominous. You eat it because, again, it feels rude not to. Suddenly a call goes up. A procession begins. You join a winding line of masked figures moving deeper into the woods, guided by flickering torches and the rhythm of hand drums. Each beat thuds in your chest. People chant in a mixture of tongues, Latin, Greek, maybe even Etruscan. You hear Evoi again and again, the sacred cry of the Bacchic faithful. The forest opens onto a clearing that looks prepared. There's an altar made of piled stones, covered in ivy. More statues surround it, some of Bacchus in his beautiful boyish form, others depicting him as the horned one, crowned with serpents and half drunk on divine frenzy. Offerings are piled high: wine, bread, honey, meat, flowers, even small trinkets. Someone places a golden ring with shaking hands and says a quick prayer. Then the music shifts, faster, wilder. A flute hits a shrill note that feels like it might split the air open. People start to dance, not the elegant, measured steps of Roman banquets, but raw ecstatic movement. Twisting, spinning, falling. A woman pulls her hair down and screams, not in pain but in pure release. A man tears off his tunic and rolls on the ground laughing. It's chaos, but it's organised chaos. Ritual chaos. You start to understand why this is sacred. Here's something curious you wouldn't expect. Scholars still debate whether these rites were genuinely spiritual or just elaborate excuses for debauchery. Some argue the Bacchanalia were deeply mystical, rooted in ancient fertility cults and shamanistic trance states. Others say, nah, it was just an excuse for Romans to get wasted and hook up in the woods. The truth, probably both. That's what makes it so compelling. There's no clean line between worship and indulgence here. You're pulled into the dance by a young woman wearing a fawnskin wrap. Her feet are bare and bleeding slightly, but she doesn't seem to care. You lose track of the steps quickly, but it doesn't matter. You move. You move until your lungs burn and your body forgets how to be tired. You scream with everyone else and something cracks open inside you. Something old and quiet and aching. It doesn't feel like partying, it feels like shedding. Then the music stops, just like that, mid-beat, mid-breath. The distance falls like a heavy curtain. Everyone freezes. From behind the altar, a tall figure appears. He wears a crown of ivy and a mask that's half man, half beast. His chest is bare, painted with swirls of red and gold. He holds a staff tipped with the pinecone thyrsus, and when he speaks, his voice sounds like it's coming from below the earth. "Who among you is ready to be unmaiden?" he asks. No one answers, but several people drop to their knees. You feel your heart pound. Not in fear exactly, in awe. This isn't a party anymore. This is a god's house. The god's house doesn't look like much, honestly. There are no columns, no gold leaf ceilings, no polished statues under vaulted arches. It's just a forest clearing under a bruised purple sky with damp moss beneath your toes and torchlights, making the trees dance like giants swaying just out of reach. But somehow that makes it more divine. Everything official in Rome, the temples, the shrines, the marble forums, is built to remind you that the gods exist at a distance. You're a subject, a spectate, a polite admirer. But here, in the sacred chaos of the Bacchanalia, you're not looking at divinity, you're soaking in it. The masked man, or is he more than a man, steps forward and raises his thyrsus. "Evoe! Bacchus!" he cries. The crowd answers in a single voice, loud and vibrating with wild energy. Evo! You still have no idea what unmaking means, but it doesn't sound like a metaphor anymore. Then the rites begin in earnest. They don't follow any script you know of. One woman begins to sing a slow, trembling chant. Her voice rises and falls like wind through reeds. Another person begins to weep, full-on, chest-heaving sobs, and no one tries to stop him. A group of dancers circle the altar in a slow spiral, stepping in time with the drums. Everything is emotion, raw, bare, exposed. And that's when it happens. A boy, no older than 17, breaks from the crowd. His eyes roll back in his head, and he collapses, shaking onto the moss. A priestess rushes to his side and cradles his head. You panic, seizure, but she smiles gently and strokes his hair, murmuring something low and soothing. "The god has taken him," someone whispers near you. "He'll speak soon," and speak he does. After a minute, the boy's body stills. He sits up, eyes wide but focused, and begins to chant in fluent Greek, a language he almost certainly doesn't know. You don't know what he's saying, but several people do, and they gasp, then kneel. He says Bacchus is pleased, Albini murmurs beside you. Tonight is his night. You feel a chill even though the night is warm, because you saw it happen. No trickery, no sleight of hand, and just a kid trembling on the forest floor, now possessed by something very old and very real. But how real is real? Here's a fun twist. Some scholars argue that the Bacchic rites were just an early form of mass psychological release. No literal gods needed. The masks, the music, the wine, all combined to push people into altered states of consciousness, the same way rhythmic drumming and chanting still do in tribal cultures today. No possession, just deep trance, your brain playing its own tricks. Others say, no, this was actual divine ecstasy. A direct line to the gods, no middlemen, no priests, no temples, just a crack in the world where Bacchus could step through and walk among mortals. And if that's true, then you're not watching a play tonight. You're in the middle of a visitation. Either way, the rites continue. A goat appears again, led by 2 initiates. This time things take a turn, it's trembling. The energy shifts, the music grows darker, lower, the drums slow. You hear murmurs about blood, and then the priest in the beast mask raises a knife. You want to look away, but you don't. The sacrifice is swift, cleaner than expected. No screaming, just a sharp flash of silver and a sudden stillness. The goat's body is laid on the altar, and red wine is poured over it in long glugging rivulets. Whether it's symbolic or not, you can't tell, but people start to chant louder now, circling the altar in a frenzy, touching the stone with reverence. Some smear the wine or blood onto their faces, leaving crimson streaks that catch the firelight. This is no longer PG-13, but it's also not mindless, it's precise, ritualized, almost mathematical in its rhythm, and again Rome didn't like this one bit. See, when the Bacchanalia first began showing up in Rome, around 200 BCE, it wasn't a scandal yet. At first, it was a relatively low-key affair, practiced mostly by Greek-speaking immigrants and lower-class women. The rites happened maybe a few times a year, usually in secret groves or hidden chambers. The Senate shrugged. Just another foreign cult, like the dozens that passed through Rome all the time. But then it grew, fast. One man, a certain Pacula Annia, apparently a priestess, decided to kick things up a notch. She opened the rites to men, increased the frequency of gatherings from 3 times a year to 5 times a month, and started holding them at night. Secret initiations, cross-dressing, intoxicants, sexual rites, rumours of orgies, blackmail and murder began to circulate like wildfire. And Rome panicked. Why? Not because of the wine, not even because of the sex. Rome had wine, Rome invented orgies. But this was different. This was uncontrolled, populist, subversive. It involved women, slaves, freedmen, all the people who weren't supposed to have power, suddenly finding meaning in a god that celebrated them. No hierarchy, no rules, just ecstasy. You can almost feel it happening around you now, 2,000 years too late, the way the rites dissolve the world. A slave kneels beside a noblewoman, both of them laughing as they pour wine into each other's mouths. A bearded man sobs in the arms of someone he calls mother, though she's clearly younger than him. A pair of young men kiss openly, unconcerned. There's no judgment here, no punishment, only the ritual, the god and the night. And then the initiations begin. Albinia tells you they happen in stages. You're a guest now, an observer. But next time, if you choose, you can take the oath, you'll be blindfolded, led through a series of symbolic deaths and rebirths. You'll be asked to give something up, to break something sacred, to confess your hidden shame. Only then can you wear the mask of Bacchus fully. You ask what happens after that. She just smiles. You stop pretending. It's not even midnight yet, and you feel like your brain has been turned inside out, rinsed in honey wine, and reassembled with ivy. The flute starts again, the beat returns, the night pulses forward like a living thing, and somewhere deep in your ribs you feel him, the god, not watching, dancing, you might never leave. You wake up with dirt in your mouth and a hangover that feels like it was personally handcrafted by Hephaestus himself. The trees above you are swaying gently, as if applauding your survival. The birds are chirping far too loudly and your left sandal is missing. Again. You're not entirely sure when the Bacchanal ended, or if it ever really did, but judging by the dew clinging to your tunic and the trail of empty goblets in the underbrush, you'd guess the sun's been up for a while. You sit up slowly, and that's when you notice it. Someone left a laurel wreath beside you. It's fresh, green, carefully woven. No note, just the wreath and a smear of what looks like ash on the stone next to your head. It could mean anything. Maybe someone thought you looked dead and gave you a ceremonial parting gift. Or maybe it's an invitation. By the time you stagger back to the outskirts of Rome, the city is already alive with clamour. Markets are opening, bakers shouting about hot bread, children chasing dogs through narrow alleys. You feel like a ghost. No one knows what happened in the grove last night. Or maybe they do and they're just very good at pretending not to. You take a detour through the Subura, Rome's seedy underbelly, where all things messy and magnificent happen. It's here you overhear a pair of men whispering near a fruit stand. One glances around nervously and mutters, "They're recruiting again, more initiations, every night this week." The other scoffs. "They'll bring the Senate down on them. Mark my words." You try not to listen, but it's impossible. There's an undercurrent of tension running through the streets now, thin but unmistakable, like the city is balancing on a wine-soaked tightrope. Later that day, you meet Albinia again, this time in daylight. In a dusty courtyard surrounded by crumbling brick walls and the scent of fig trees. She's no longer wrapped in lion skin. She looks almost normal. A grey tunic, sandals, hair tied back. But her eyes still carry the gleam of the night before, like the stars got stuck in them. "You made it through your first night," she says, pouring you watered-down wine. "Most people don't sleep. You did. That's good. It means you're grounded." You take a sip and ask the obvious question, what happens now? She shrugs. Now? You decide how far you want to go. You're not sure how to answer that, but something in your face must say enough, because she leans in close and whispers, "There's a gathering tonight. A private one. For initiates. You don't have to come, but if you do, you have to be ready." "Ready for what, though?" you ask. "Ready to let go of what you think is real." "Okay, sure. No pressure." That night, after a half-hearted bath and a meal you don't remember eating, you find yourself approaching a seemingly abandoned building near the Aventine Hill. It's old, ivy-covered, with a doorway hidden behind draped cloth. No guards, no signs, just a low thrum of music, barely audible. You step through. Inside, it's dimly lit. A few candles, a scattering of cushions. The smell of myrrh and sandalwood heavy in the air. A few familiar faces from the grove nod in greeting. Albinia is there too, seated beside an older woman with silver hair and tattooed arms who introduces herself only as Syra. Syra's voice is deep, smoky. She tells you this is an initium noctis, the night of beginnings. You'll be shown symbols, given wine, asked questions. You can walk away at any time, but if you stay until the final breath of the ritual, you'll never be the same. And then they bring out the masks. Not the party masks from the night before, these are different. Made of clay and bone, decorated with feathers, thorns, few bits of a mirror. Each one seems to radiate its own strange personality. You're told to choose, but not to overthink it. "Let the mask pick you," Syra says. Your hand drifts toward one with cracked porcelain and a single golden eye. The moment your fingers touch it, something clicks, and you know you're in. They blindfold you next. You're led through a series of narrow hallways, your feet moving carefully over stone and straw. Voices hum around you. A chant in a language you can't place. You feel hands on your shoulders, your arms, gentle, guiding. You're turned, Spian whispered to. It's disorienting, purposefully so. Eventually, you're stopped. You stand at the threshold, Syra's voice echoes. Speak your name, not the one Rome gave you, the one your soul remembers. You panic for a second. Then a word slips out of your mouth, unbidden. It's not a name you recognize, but the room murmurs approval. The blindfold comes off. You're standing in front of a basin of wine, deep red, almost black in the candlelight. They ask you to gaze into it, to see, to confess. One by one, others do the same. You see laughter, tears, shaking hands. It's not performative, it's raw. People are shedding their masks, not the ones on their faces, but the ones they wear every day in Rome. When it's your turn, you hesitate. What do you even have to confess? Turns out quite a bit. You speak and the words tumble out like a broken dam. Fears you didn't know you carried. Regrets you buried under layers of sarcasm and logic. Shame, longing, loneliness. By the end, your voice is hoarse and your eyes are wet. But no one judges you. They touch your back gently. They offer you wine. They say, welcome. And then the final rite begins. They call it the libertas, the letting go. Everyone dances. Not wild like in the woods, but slow, swaying, eyes closed. It feels like floating. Time stops. The wine works its magic there. And Bacchus, he's here again. Not as a booming presence or a terrifying roar, but as warmth, as breath, as a beat just beneath your skin. You don't hallucinate him, you remember him, like he's always been with you, waiting for you to remember your own wildness. Here's a weird historical nugget for you. Archaeologists once found a temple in southern Italy with inscriptions to Dionysus that simply read, "To him who returns." No titles, no boasts, just that. As if the god of madness was also the god of memory, of returning to something ancient inside yourself. You leave the ritual long after midnight, mask in hand, heart strangely calm. Rome still stands, the streets are quiet. The stars blink above like lazy guards, but something has changed. You're not just visiting the Bacchanalia anymore, you're becoming part of it. The next evening creeps up on you before you're ready. Rome doesn't stop turning just because your brain's still humming from last night's initiation. There's baker shouts about his olives, children scream over marbles in the street, and a soldier curses the gods over a busted sandal strap. Life, in all its predictable, structured Roman glory, marches on, but you're different. You feel like you've been turned inside out and carefully reassembled, but not entirely in the right order. Something is still moving beneath your ribs, something rhythmic, ancient, and hungry for more. You think it might be the music. You hear it again that night, echoing faintly through the trees. The flutes, the drums, the whispery voices rising like mist. You don't even need directions anymore. Your feet carry you straight to the grove like they've always known the way. But this time you arrive early, and everything is still. No crowd, no dancing, just the forest silent and waiting. Then you hear it. A soft whoomph of breath, a low throb of drumbeat. One, then another. Two people enter the clearing, masked and barefoot, their robes fluttering like smoke. One carries a hand drum, the other a panpipe. They begin to play slowly at first, then with building intensity. You're watching a ritual begin from the beginning. No crowd noise, no frenzy yet, just the seed. Others arrive one by one. No greetings, no words, just nods and smiles. They take their places like actors stepping into a play, except no one has a script, only instincts. Someone brings out baskets of fruit and amphorae of wine. Someone else begins painting symbols in the dirt. A circle, a spiral, a symbol that looks eerily like an eye with vines growing out of it. And then, the masks come out again. This time you choose yours without hesitation. You don't even need to try it on, it fits. And when you put it on, the world shifts. The torchlight seems to pulse, taking on strange hues, blues and greens that shouldn't exist in firelight. The trees stretch taller. The drums sound like heartbeats the size of mountains. Every scent, grape, must, sweat, burning herbs, hits you like a memory from a life you haven't lived yet. You're no longer in Rome. You're in Bacchus's realm now, where logic doesn't matter, and time folds like wet parchment. A group of dancers begins to circle the altar. They're stomping in rhythm, their feet kicking up little clouds of dust. You join them without thinking. Your body moves on its own, remembering steps you never learned. Each beat drives deeper, like it's chiseling away whatever fragments of normalcy you still carry. Then the music shifts again, faster, looser, unpredictable. A man leaps into the center of the circle, his mask painted with wild stripes, his limbs moving like a marionette possessed. He dances with reckless abandon, flinging wine from his goblet like it's holy water. Then a woman joins him, twirling with ribbons trailing from her arms, her laughter rising above the flutes in eerie joy. And suddenly, the circle breaks. People are dancing everywhere, with each other, alone, with trees, with shadows. Someone plays two panpipes at once. Someone else balances on one foot and sings in a language older than Latin. You see a young girl climb onto the altar and howl like a wolf, and no one stops her. No one even flinches. This isn't madness. This is freedom, unfiltered and sacred. The wine flows like a river. You drink deeply, and the world begins to unravel in beautiful little threads. One moment, you're lying in the grass watching the stars swirl in slow serpentine spirals. The next, you're gripping the shoulders of someone weeping into your neck. You don't know their name, they don't know yours, but it doesn't matter. Nothing matters except the sound of the drum, the crush of the grape, the fire in the leaves, and the music. Oh gods, the music. There's something about Bacchic music that bypasses your brain entirely. It doesn't just make you want to dance, it needs you to. The rhythm grabs your spine and shakes the dust of civilization off your bones. You lose hours, maybe days in the sound. It tells you stories, not with words, but with thuds and flutters and aching primal notes. Here's a strange fact most people don't realise. The flute, or aulos, was considered dangerously erotic by Roman moralists. It was a double-piped instrument, and the way players used their lips, breath, and cheeks to coax out its hypnotic tones was seen as too suggestive, too feminine, too foreign. That's why Bacchic rites always had flutes, because they knew exactly how much power sound has over the body. You find yourself pressed against a tree, gasping for breath, your limbs trembling from dancing too hard. A masked woman offers you a fig dipped in honey. You take it. It tastes like summer and secrets. She doesn't speak, just places her hand on your chest and says, "You're almost there." Almost where, she doesn't say. Instead, she guides you toward the edge of the clearing, where a fire crackles in a stone ring. Around it sit 5 elders in elaborate masks, some smiling, some solemn, one with a mask made entirely of grapes. They beckon you closer. This is the next step. You kneel. The one with the grape mask reaches forward and marks your forehead with wine, then speaks in Latin. Amplius te non continis. You no longer contain yourself. And you feel it. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. Something inside you shifts. The version of you that came to Rome, the careful, skeptical, slightly sarcastic one, melts. You're not sure who takes their place, but it feels good, not like becoming someone else, like finally becoming you, stripped of centuries of noise. One of the elders leans close and whispers something you'll never be able to repeat. Not because you forget it, but because it isn't in words. It's in vibration, meaning. A kind of inner quake that spreads through your bones and sets your soul humming like a lyre string. And then, without warning, everyone is still, completely still. The music stops mid-note. The fire flares once, then dims. And in that silence, absolute, sacred, you hear him, not with your ears, with your blood. The god is here, not in form, not in voice, just presence. You realise why Bacchus is so different from the others. Jupiter demands obedience, Mars demands glory, but Bacchus, he doesn't demand anything. He offers. He invites you to break your own chains, to spill your own wine, to kiss the mouth of the world. And if you say yes, he dances with you. Not above you, with you. And you do say yes, because by now the grove isn't just a place, it's home. Morning in Rome feels like a slap after a night in the grove. The sun is too loud. The streets too straight and the people entirely too sober. You walk through the forum and feel like you're wearing a secret under your skin. Everyone here is wrapped in status and duty. Togas crisp, back straight, brows furrowed with matters of state or grain taxes. But you're still barefoot, still hungover on divinity, still hearing fluters in the corners of your mind. And as you pass a pair of senators arguing over shipping tariffs, you can't help but smirk. If only they knew what was going on in the woods just beyond the Aventine. And maybe they do, because the Bacchanalia isn't as hidden as it once was. What started as an occasional twilight ritual has become a kind of underground movement. More than worship, less than rebellion exactly. It's something in between. You've heard whispers. More gatherings cropping up all over the city, initiates walking among the patricians, noble daughters slipping away in disguise. This thing has roots now. And those roots are cracking Rome's marble floor. That becomes even clearer when you're summoned by Albinia, not to the grove, but to a private villa on the Esquiline Hill. You expect another initiation, another night of writhing bodies and holy madness, but instead you find yourself in a quiet atrium surrounded by potted fig trees. Albinia sits with 2 others, both older, both with the calm, watchful eyes of people used to being listened to. This is beyond ritual now, she says, offering you a seat and a cup of watered wine. It's becoming a movement. A movement. You let the words settle in your chest. It feels too sharp for what you've experienced. The grove wasn't organised. It wasn't political. It was elemental. But Albinia sees your hesitation and nods. I know, she says. It doesn't feel like politics, but that's how Rome sees it. A space where slaves and senators drink from the same cup, where women lead and men surrender, where no one wears their rank, only their mask. That terrifies them. And there it is. The reason Rome will never tolerate Bacchus, no matter how many grapes you offer. It isn't the orgies or the wine or the night-long trances, it's the power. More specifically, who gets to hold it. The Bacchanalia has become a sanctuary for the marginalised. Women, foreigners, freedmen, even a few of the more adventurous patrician wives, they're all slipping into the shadows, donning masks and tasting freedom, real freedom. Not the kind granted by the Senate, but the kind you rip from the jaws of the gods. You learn that night about a woman named Hispala Facinia, a freed woman who used to serve wine at Bacchic gatherings, but is now considered a high priestess in several districts. Her rise is meteoric and dangerous. Rome has always tolerated a little divinity in women, as long as it stays within carefully measured boundaries. Vestal virgins, sure, but women leading ecstatic rites, wielding ritual knives, whispering prophecy with wine-soaked lips, that's a different story. You also learn about a young man named Publius Abutius, born into a wealthy family, who broke ranks with his own mother after being initiated into the rites. She tried to stop him from joining, warned him, threatened him, even accused him of madness, and now he's vanished. Some say he fled south to join an older sect of the cult. Others say Rome silenced him. What's happening isn't just scandalous, it's threatening. Because Rome doesn't know how to handle wildness. It can conquer nations, build roads through mountains, and turn kings into client states. But it can't stomach something that refuses to wear a uniform, and the Bacchanalia refuses everything. Later that week, you're invited to another rite, this one smaller, more intimate. It's held in the basement of a wealthy woman's villa, behind a false wall that leads to a hidden chamber. Candles line the floor. The walls are painted with ivy and animals mid-transformation. You recognise the style, Etruscan. Older than Rome, maybe older than writing. Symbols swirl across the plaster like dancing spirits. You kneel with the others, you drink, you chant, you pass through the veil once again. This time it's quieter. The frenzy has passed. This isn't a wild dance, it's a slow descent. A kind of collective dreaming. The wine they use tonight is mixed with something else, something that makes your limbs heavy and your mind drift like a leaf on water. You begin to see things, not hallucinations exactly, memories that aren't yours. You see a woman birthing twins in a forest, a circle of masked midwives singing around her. You see a boy lying in a pool of wine laughing with his mouth open to the stars. You see a goat walking backward into a cave and a child following. Each vision lasts only a breath, but it stays with you. Everyone sees something. No one talks about it afterward. You're not supposed to. The visions are yours, a gift from the god. There's a debate among scholars today. Well, the ones who don't immediately dismiss Bacchic rites as orgiastic nonsense. Some believe the rituals involved psychotropic substances, perhaps plants native to southern Italy, mixed into the wine to induce visions. Others insist the altered states were entirely psychological, the result of sensory overload and ritual suggestion. And then there are those fringe theorists who claim the Bacchic initiates were in touch with another realm altogether, a plane of reality where the gods still walk and humans can remember their true forms. Whatever the truth is, you're beginning to feel like you're slipping between worlds, and that's not always comforting, because even as the rites offer joy and freedom, they come with danger, not just from the state, but from within. You've seen initiates lose themselves, not figuratively, literally. There's a young man you used to see at every gathering, always laughing, always first to dance. He hasn't spoken in days. He just stares into the fire, his mask still tied to his belt, even in daylight. And the woman with the tattooed arms, Syra, she's vanished. No one speaks her name. You get the sense that asking would be a mistake. Albinia pulls you aside after the rite. Her expression is softer now, but her eyes burn brighter than ever. People think freedom means doing whatever you want, she says, but it's harder than that. Real freedom is surrender, not to anyone else, to the truth, and that's why some people can't handle Bacchus. He doesn't lie, he strips you bare and holds up a mirror. Most people spend their whole lives trying not to see. You're quiet, because deep down you know she's right. Later, as you walk home under the pale hush of dawn, you realise that something has shifted again. The Bacchanalia is no longer just an experience, it's becoming a life. And as more people gather under its ivy-strewn wings, as more masks are handed out and more secrets whispered in the dark, you start to feel the pressure building. Rome is watching, and Rome doesn't watch for long before it acts. The thing about losing yourself is that for a while, it feels like freedom. Every night in the grove or a secret chamber is another night where you don't have to be who Rome says you are. No toga, no title, no carefully measured words, just rhythm and heat and masks that let you be more than your daily skin. But freedom, real freedom, never comes without consequences, and lately there's been a tension in the air. Not just in the city, but in the cult itself. A kind of stretching, a sense that something is about to snap, and part of you, traitorous, Roman-raised, is still clinging to logic. You're starting to wonder if it should, because it's growing too fast, too open. You notice it first in the frequency of the rites. What used to be rare and sacred is now common and messy. Gatherings that once happened only 3 times a year are now held 5 times a month, sometimes 10, sometimes more. It's gotten to the point where someone is always in the grove, always in trance, always crying or laughing or dancing or speaking in tongues, and the energy, it's different, less reverent, more desperate. Like everyone is chasing the god but getting lost in the woods on the way. You start to see it in the initiations too. Once solemn, deeply symbolic ceremonies now feel rushed. You watch one unfold in a cramped villa, too many people packed into too small a space. The wine is cheap, the chants barely coordinated. Someone throws up in the corner, and no one notices, and the new initiate, a boy no older than 16, collapses mid-dance and has to be dragged out, limbs twitching. No one speaks his name afterward. And still, more people come. Some because they're called, others because they're curious, but many, too many, because they heard there's a place in Rome where no one cares who you are, or what laws you've broken. A place with no rules, no punishment, no control. You try to ignore it. You try to remember what it felt like that first night. The ivy, the masks, the whisper of the god in your bones. But it's harder now. There's too much noise, too many bodies, too many people who aren't here for transformation. They're here to vanish, to escape. And Bacchus, generous as he is, opens his arms to all of them. Albinia sees it too. You find her one night sitting alone beside the altar, a goblet untouched in her hand. She doesn't look up as you approach. They don't understand, she murmurs. They think this is a festival, a stage, but it's not. You sit beside her in the firelight, unsure of what to say. This was never meant to be every night, she continues. The god gives us madness, but it's a cycle. Madness, death, rebirth. They've forgotten the death part. They want to stay in the frenzy forever. And that's not divine, that's just drowning. You watch her lift the goblet and pour the wine out onto the earth. A silent offering, or maybe a warning. You walk back to the city that night feeling unsteady. Not just physically, though the wine didn't help, but in your soul. Something's wrong. The Bacchanalia, once a hidden current of wild truth, is becoming a river that threatens to flood the whole city. And you know what happens when rivers flood in Rome? Someone builds a dam, or a wall, or calls in the Senate. You hear rumours the next day, whispers in the marketplace. When murder was in bathhouses, a merchant's daughter was caught sneaking out in a borrowed tunic. A group of slaves was found performing rites in the open, dancing on rooftops, howling praises to Bacchus at dawn. A patrician son disappeared after a ceremony. His family is furious, powerful, and vengeful. You walk through the forum and see a group of senators standing in tight formation, their brows furrowed, voices sharp. They were not talking about war or taxes. They're talking about the cult. About your cult. It's no longer a secret. And still the rites continue. One night, you return to the grove and find it transformed. Not physically, same trees, same altar, but energetically. The place is vibrating, packed. Dozens more than usual. The music is louder, the dancing more frantic, the wine stronger. Someone is burning herbs that make the air feel thick and sweet and dangerous. You try to find Albinia, but she's nowhere to be seen. In her place is a new figure. Young, charismatic, robed in crimson and gold. He calls himself Corvinus, and he preaches like Bacchus himself is whispering in his ear. His words are passionate, hypnotic. He says the cult is rising, that the god is tired of hiding, that the Senate can burn, and the crowd eats it up. They chant his name, they throw their master at his feet, they kneel and weep and scream. It feels less like a ritual and more like a revolution with good lighting. You stand at the edge of the grove, mask in hand, and feel your stomach twist. Because this isn't what you joined. You came for wildness. Yes, for the chaos and the music and the strange beauty of surrender. But this is ambition. This is fire that wants to consume. And somewhere deep in your bones you hear Bacchus sigh. Here's a strange historical tidbit. In ancient accounts, like those of Livy, the Bacchanalia became so frequent, so massive, that the Senate believed the cult was plotting political rebellion. According to official records, the rites weren't just happening at night anymore, they were occurring every single day. Rome couldn't tolerate that, not just because of the orgies or the drinking, but because it meant Rome was losing control. And now, in your time, you see that fear becoming prophecy. The cult is everywhere. It spreads like ivy through cracks in the city's walls. Slaves sing Bacchic hymns as they scrub marble floors. Noble women leave grapes at crossroads as offerings. Young men draw Thyrsus symbols on tavern walls in charcoal, daring the guards to erase them. The madness isn't confined to groves anymore. It's leaking. You ask yourself if this is what Bacchus wants, and you don't know the answer. Because Bacchus is a god of contradictions. He brings joy and destruction. He offers ecstasy and ruin in the same goblet. He breaks you and remakes you. But he doesn't promise you'll like the version you become. And now, with every new initiate, with every louder chant, you wonder, are we being transformed, or are we just being devoured? You look at your mask, cracked around the edges, stained with wine, and realise it's a question only the god can answer. And gods are terrible at giving straight answers. You start dreaming in wine. Not just of it, in it. Deep, rich red all around you, thick as velvet and endless as sky. Sometimes you float, sometimes you sink. Sometimes a hand reaches out from the depths, beckoning you closer. You can't tell if it's trying to save you or drag you down. Every time you wake, your tongue tastes like copper and your sheets are damp with sweat. It doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like a message, or maybe a warning, because something has shifted. The rites aren't just louder now, they're darker. You see it in the people. Hollow eyes, bruised lips, voices hoarse from too many nights crying in ecstasy or agony or both. You see people wandering the city in daylight, still wearing ivy wreaths, still marked with the god's symbols. Some of them smile too widely, some don't smile at all. You pass one man muttering to himself in a language that doesn't exist. Another stands in the middle of a fountain, arms raised like he's waiting to be struck by lightning, and when you make eye contact, he just laughs. You ask Albinia what's happening, and her face tightens. They're going too far, she says. They think excess is devotion, that the louder they scream, the closer they'll get. She leads you back to the grove that night, not for a rite, but to clean. You haven't seen it in daylight in weeks, maybe months, and it's different, overgrown and stained. Bottles everywhere, broken amphorae scattered like bones. Candle wax hardened in puddles. The altar is covered in soot, and the ivy has begun to wilt from too many trampling feet. This isn't sacred anymore, she says. It's indulgence. Bacchus doesn't just demand chaos, he demands balance. Madness without meaning is just noise. She kneels and starts scrubbing the stone with lemon water. You join her. It feels strange, almost profane, to be cleaning something so wild. But maybe that's the point. The rites were never meant to be permanent. They were a cycle. Creation, release, rest. Everyone's been stuck in release for too long, but not everyone agrees. Corvinus, the self-declared prophet, has begun organising more elaborate gatherings, larger, more public, more dangerous. One night you hear he held a ritual inside a public bathhouse, locking the doors and refusing to let anyone leave until sunrise. They say someone died. No one knows who, no one seems to care. He calls it devotion. You call it unravelling. Albinia tries to confront him. You go with her. The meeting takes place in an old wine cellar turned temple. The walls are painted with scenes of Dionysus, reclining on a panther, offering wine to mortals with a wicked smile. Corvinus is seated on a low platform surrounded by followers. They fan him with peacock feathers and smear oils on his bare chest like he's already ascended to godhood. Albinia steps forward. You're leading them into fire, she says. He smiles. Isn't that where the phoenix is born? You clench your fists, but he's not wrong. That's the maddening part. Bacchus is fire. Transformation through destruction. But it's a question of who is burning, and whether there's anything left to rise afterward. Corvinus sees your hesitation. He points to you. You've felt him. You've heard the music in your bones. Don't tell me you want to go back to the world of taxes and togas. Rome offers control. We offer divinity. You don't respond, because you remember what it felt like, that first rite, that wild joy, the sensation of being seen by something vast and beautiful. You don't want to lose that. But this isn't divinity, it's delusion dressed in ritual. You leave with Albinia. That night, in a small circle with only a few initiates, you perform your own rite. No madness, no screaming, just silence, soft music and slow movements under a moon that looks down like a weary parent. You light a candle for Syra, another for the nameless boy who collapsed, a third for yourself. You've lost something, and you're not sure if you'll find it again. The next morning you wake to shouting in the streets. A woman, naked, bleeding, eyes wild, is running through the forum, screaming praises to Bacchus. Guards chase her down and drag her away. No one helps, no one looks. The Senate has had enough. Here's your historical fact of the night. In 186 BC, the Roman Senate issued a decree known as the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, an official ban on the Bacchic cult. Livy, Rome's favourite moralising historian, claimed the rites had become a hotbed of criminal activity, murders, sexual violence and conspiracy. He said the cult operated like a secret society, initiating members in the dark, swearing them to secrecy and seducing them into lawlessness. Was it all true? That's still debated. Some scholars think Livy exaggerated, using the Bacchanalia as a scapegoat to reinforce conservative values. Others believe the Senate genuinely feared the cult, especially its appeal to women, the poor and foreigners. Whatever the reason, the crackdown was brutal, and now, in your Rome, it's happening again. You hear about arrests, raids, a gathering on the Quirinal Hill broken up by soldiers wielding clubs. Corvinus is gone, vanished, fled, or executed. No one knows. Albinia goes into hiding. The grove is sealed off with rope and threats. They say anyone caught entering will be labelled a traitor. But the rituals don't stop, they just go deeper underground. You find them in strange places now, inside abandoned aqueducts, behind crumbling statues, even beneath the floor of a bakery. Each rite is quieter, more reverent. The frenzy has passed. What's left is the core, and Bacchus, he's still there. Not with thunder or ecstasy, but with a gentle touch, a whisper, a glass of wine offered in the dark. You realise something. The real Bacchanalia was never the noise. It was the choice, to unmask, to unravel, to return to the parts of yourself Rome tried to erase. And even if Rome forbids it, even if the Senate sets the forest on fire, Bacchus will always return. He's the god of rebirth, after all. You sip your wine and close your eyes, and in the silence you hear the faintest sound, a drum beat, distant, but steady. The name she gives you is Junia. She's a senator's daughter, or at least she was. You meet her on a night when the air feels too still, the kind of night when even the city's stray cats keep their heads down. She finds you in the ruins of a collapsed bathhouse, where someone carved Dionysian symbols into the broken tile. She doesn't wear a mask, bold move these days, and her hands are ink-stained, smudged from writing or sketching, you can't tell which. She offers you a fig and says, "They think I'm dead." You blink. You didn't even ask a question. Junia laughs softly. "My father told the Senate I was killed by brigands. It's more dignified than admitting your daughter joined a god of madness." You sit across from her, on what used to be a pillar, and share the fig. Junia's a different kind of initiate. Sharp, serious, she speaks like she's memorised half the Greek tragedies and lived through the rest. But there's something else in her voice. Grief, maybe. The kind that doesn't go away, just hardens into armour. She tells you about her first rite. How she snuck out of her family's domus dressed as a servant. How she followed a trail of ivy drawn in chalk down an alley near the Subura. How the grove felt like stepping into a story someone forgot to finish. "I saw him," she says. "Bacchus. Not just felt him. I saw him." You lean in, heartbeat skipping like a startled deer. "He was nothing like the paintings," she continues. "He wasn't handsome or drunk or crowned in vines. He was shifting. One moment a boy, then a beast, then a woman holding a skull. He was smiling, but not kindly." She pauses. It was the kind of smile that says, "I love you, but I will tear you apart if you lie to me." And that's when she knew. She couldn't go back. Not to the domus, not to marriage arrangements or polite dinner parties or reciting Cicero to bored cousins. Once you've stood in the presence of something real, you can't pretend anymore. That's what makes Junia dangerous. Not just to her father, who now votes on anti-Bacchic legislation with hollow eyes and a stiff spine, but to the entire idea of what Roman womanhood is supposed to be. Because Junia didn't just leave her life, she torched it. And if she can do it, others might too. You realise something sitting in that ruin. listening to her story. This whole thing, it's not just a cult, it's a revolution dressed in ivy, and for people like Junia, like Albinia, like the slaves who sing hymns while cleaning temples, they're not joining Bacchus because they want chaos. They're joining because he offers what Rome never does. Permission. Permission to scream, to grieve, to dance, to want, and Rome doesn't forgive people who stop pretending. That night, Junia takes you to a hidden chamber beneath a theatre. Fitting, really. Bacchus is the god of performance, after all. Inside, a small group gathers around a cracked marble bust of the god lit from beneath by a single oil lamp. No flutes, no drums, just voices. They recite something, part prayer, part poem. You recognise some lines from Euripides. Others are new, raw. They speak of longing, of fury, of joy so sharp it cuts. You add your voice and something in your chest loosens. Afterward, Junia passes you a scroll. It's a copy, she says, from an old Bacchic manuscript, probably Greek, possibly forged. No one's sure, but it holds something. You open it slowly. The writing isn't just text, it's arranged. Swirling lines that mimic ivy, letters that seem to pulse if you look too long. One section stands out, a phrase repeated in 3 languages. The god does not come when you call, he comes when you break. Charming. You tuck it into your tunic and feel the weight of it press against your heart. A few days later, Junia disappears. Not vanishes into the crowd, disappears. Gone, without a trace. Her name stops coming up in hushed conversations. The ruins are empty. Even Albinia hasn't heard anything. The rumour spreads fast. The Senate found her. Or maybe her father did. They say she was dragged from a ritual and imprisoned. Others claim she was forced into a temple to Vesta to cleanse her defilement. You don't believe that. Junia wouldn't let them purify her. She'd set the temple on fire first. But what if the rumours are worse? What if she didn't disappear because of the Senate? What if the cult turned on her? Because lately things have been fractured. Some initiates are loyal to Corvinus's legacy. They want fire, noise, revenge. Others follow Albinia's path. Quiet devotion, preservation, meaning over madness. And then there are those who've begun treating Bacchus not as a god, but as a symbol. A flag to wave in the face of every law they have ever hated. It's splintering. And when cults splinter, things break. You attend a rite a few nights later. One you instantly regret. It's in a villa basement. You don't know the host. The wine is bitter, the masks grotesque, exaggerated. The chanting starts before anyone's as settled. Someone screams too early. The energy feels off. There's no rhythm, just pressure. You feel like the air is being pulled out of the room, and then someone brings out a goat. You tense. You've seen this before. Animal sacrifice isn't uncommon, but it's always controlled, symbolic. This feels performative. Someone pushes forward with a blade, clearly drunk, eyes glassy. A few people laugh nervously, someone claps. You step in, instinctively, and grab the man's wrist. This isn't the rite, you say. He shoves you hard enough to knock the wind out of you. The goat escapes. No one cheers, and for a moment, everyone just stands there, uncertain, suddenly aware that the god isn't with them tonight. You leave before it's over. On your way home, you see a sign etched into a wall with charcoal. 3 interlocked circles, the new symbol some groups are using to mark meeting points. You wipe it off with your sleeve. The cult has become a mirror now, reflecting whatever the initiate brings to it. And Rome? Rome's reflection is fear. You return to your room and unroll Junior's scroll again. The ink has faded slightly, but that same line stares back at you. He comes when you break. You feel it again, that low drum beat in your bones. You lie back, close your eyes, and wonder how long it will be before everyone breaks. Because something is coming, not just a crackdown, a reckoning. You feel it before you hear it, a cold ripple under the skin of the city. Rome is quieter these days, not in volume, but in tension. People speak in shorter sentences. Doors close faster. The air smells less like bread and ash, and more like fear. Something is slinking through the alleys, not on paws or hooves, but on orders and names, lists. You hear that word whispered again and again, lists. It starts with the disappearances. At first, just 1 or 2, someone you met once in a rite, someone who smiled at you across a fire, someone who danced until sunrise and told you their secret name. Gone. The stories vary. Arrested, fled, vanished into Bacchus's arms. But you know Rome better than that. Nothing disappears in this city without reason. It's not the god who's taking them, it's the Senate. You catch confirmation at the edge of a forum near the grain market. 2 men in uniform, low-ranking guards, armed but bored, stand under a shaded arch, talking too loud. One says he was sent to collect a woman from a domus in Trastevere. Said she was mad, he shrugs. Ritual stuff, covered in wine and twigs, claimed a god told her to defy her father. And did she? The other asks. Didn't get the chance, the first says. The father handled it. We just cleaned up. They laugh. You keep walking. The state isn't just watching anymore, it's acting. You make your way to a quieter part of the city and slip into the back entrance of a taverna where initiates sometimes meet. The walls are thick, the ceiling's low. It smells like spiced wine and damp stone. Albinia is already there, sitting in the darkest corner, her hood up. You sit across from her, and before you speak, she shakes her head. Don't say names, she whispers. Not anymore. She hands you a small object wrapped in cloth. You unfold it and find a badge of sorts, bronze shaped like a thyrsus, barely the length of your finger. It's a marker, she says, for safe houses. They won't always be rites, but you'll know them when you see one. You ask the obvious question, how bad is it? She leans forward. Worse than you think. The Senate has been investigating for months. Spies, informants. They have testimony, or think they do. Some of it's true, some they made up. But it doesn't matter. They want blood. They're framing it as a threat to the Republic. You feel your stomach drop. A religious cult is a threat to the Republic. Albinia snorts. No. A space where women and slaves and lovers and madmen come together without permission. That's the threat. She's not wrong. And here's where history chimes in again. In 186 BCE, when the Senate decided it was time to clamp down, they didn't just shut down a few parties. They passed the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a sweeping decree that criminalised the rites, banned the cult's gatherings, and required all initiations to be approved by the Senate itself. That wasn't about safety, that was about control. Rome didn't mind gods as long as it got to tell them where to sit. What's happening now? It's echoing that moment perfectly. You get your first taste of just how far the state is willing to go 3 nights later, during what should have been a quiet gathering. It's in a cellar beneath a butcher's shop accessed by a trapdoor covered in straw. You arrive late. The music is already low and pulsing. Candles flicker. A dozen masked figures sway together, slow and reverent. No frenzy, just rhythm. You recognise the song. It's a Greek hymn, ancient and soft, barely more than a breath. And then the trapdoor slams open. It happens fast. Boots, shouting. The snarl of steel drawn in haste. Torches flood the space with harsh yellow light. Half the room freezes. The other half runs, into walls, into each other, into nowhere. One man tries to climb a support beam. A woman screams, not in ecstasy this time, but fear. You hide behind a stack of wine barrels, breath caught in your throat. The guards don't arrest everyone. Just a few. Targeted. Purposeful. They grab a pair of women, one old, one young, both masked. They rip the masks off, drag them up the stairs, vanish into the street. The rest are left behind, shaking, stunned. The cellar smells like sweat and panic. You wait until it's safe, then slip out the back. Albinia finds you the next day in a borrowed cloak and a face like ash. She doesn't cry, she doesn't need to. You both know the old woman was a midwife who sang lullabies to the god before every initiation. And the young one? She was barely 17. She once told you she joined the cult because it was the only place no one called her slave. Gone, just like that. You ask how many others have been taken. She just says, too many to name. You don't attend another rite for a while, not out of fear, exactly, but because it starts to feel like you're being watched. Not just in the streets. In your thoughts, you dream of being pulled from bed, of torches pressed against your eyes. You dream of the grove burning, and always, always, the sound of chains. You find yourself staring at your mask more often now. It's hidden beneath a loose floor tile wrapped in cloth. You pull it out, hold it. Wonder if the god still sees you through it. Does he still dance or still call? Or is he silent now, watching from the dark corners of the city, waiting for the flame to die so he can rise again? You're not sure anymore. One night you visit the grove, not for a rite, not to dance, just to see. It's quiet now, overgrown, abandoned. The altar is cracked. Ivy chokes the statues. Someone has carved Latin curses into the stone. You walk in silence, brushing aside branches, stepping over old goblets, dried herbs, broken sandals. And at the heart of it all, something unexpected. A single cup, filled with fresh wine. Someone's been here. You kneel, smell the wine. Still sweet, still sacred. You don't drink it. You just sit beside it till the stars blur and the wind carries voices you can't quite understand. That's the thing about gods like Bacchus. You can silence his music, burn his altars and chain his followers, but you'll never stop him. Because Bacchus isn't a statue in a temple. He's a hunger, a truth, a rhythm in the blood. And one day, even after Rome forgets his name, someone will still find a clearing, still hear the drums, still feel the pull. Because ecstasy, like freedom, never really dies, just hides and waits. You begin moving through the city differently now, head lower, steps quieter, ears always half-tuned for footsteps behind you. You no longer visit your usual haunts. You avoid the public baths, the bread stalls, the places where friendly voices might accidentally say your name a little too loudly. You're not even sure what name you're using anymore. The one Rome gave you? The one Bacchus whispered into your blood? Neither seems safe. The cult is being hunted. Not just at night, not just in the shadows. Everywhere. You hear about a young baker arrested in daylight for possessing prohibited symbols. His crime? Drawing a vine on the side of a loaf. A wine cellar's barrels are smashed because someone said they heard chanting in his cellar. The guard claims it's about maintaining order. But it's not about order. It's about fear. Their fear. And you're now officially one of the hunted. The name Bacchus has become toxic. You hear it in the mouths of senators like a disease. The Bacchic infection, they call it. A plague of madness. They speak as if the god has slipped into the water supply, as if any free-thinking woman or laughing slave might suddenly burst into flames and start speaking in tongues. It would almost be funny if it weren't also accurate, because you have seen it. People transformed, not just in ritual, but in life. People who are silenced now speak. People who are shamed now celebrate. You've seen the meek howl like wolves, the cold melt into weeping, the broken rise with fire in their eyes. Bacchus doesn't just show up in the woods. He shows up in you when you stop pretending, when you choose to be whole, messy, ungovernable. That's why Rome is afraid. Not of gods, of people who no longer fear Rome. And so the city tightens its grip. The Senate issues more decrees. Anyone who refuses to renounce the rites can be imprisoned. Anyone hosting a gathering without approval is labelled a traitor. Entire domus are being searched. You pass homes with red wax seals on the door. Confiscated, their occupants vanished. Even the artists are getting nervous. You notice temples stripped of ivy carvings. Statues of Dionysus quietly removed or renamed. The wine god is being erased like a mistake on a scroll. But Bacchus is not a mistake. He's the margin, the breath between lines, the wildness no empire can fully stamp out. You meet with Albinia in the back of a candlemaker's workshop. It's small, thick, with the scent of beeswax and smoke. She looks tired, older somehow. Her eyes are sunken, her voice hoarse. She's been hiding too long, living like a shadow, whispering between cracks in the city's stone skin. They're planning something bigger, she tells you. Not just arrests, an example, so you feel your stomach clench. What kind of example? The kind that doesn't need a trial. She doesn't need to say more. Rome's made examples before. Crucifixions, public drownings, entire families sentenced for the sins of one. They don't need evidence, just a story. And the Bacchanalia? Oh, they've got plenty of stories now. Corvinus, the goat incident, the bathhouse ritual, the dream visions, the blood. Whether it happened or not doesn't matter. All they need is believability, and fear will do the rest. But Albinia has a plan. A safe house. Not just a temporary hideout, but a preservation space. A place where the real rites can survive, quietly, deeply, away from the frenzy that corrupted them. Not as protest, not as performance, but as devotion. A seed buried until the soil is safe again. It's not about saving ourselves, she says. It's about saving this, what it really is. You agree to help. Of course you do. Because even if you die for it, it's better than pretending to be someone who never danced in the grove. Better than pretending you've forgotten what freedom feels like. You help move sacred objects, masks, scrolls, thyrsi, hidden inside baskets of olives and loaves of bread. You memorize safe routes, alleyways that cut through the hills. Names of allies carved under benches or burned into tiles behind kitchens. You learn how to blend, how to pass messages in coded rhymes. You become invisible, a shadow with a heartbeat, but not everyone makes it. You hear about a girl caught during transport, dragged into the street, accused of spreading Bacchic lies. They don't even give her a real trial, just a spectacle. Stripped, mocked, sentenced. She's executed at the edge of the Tiber. They say the river ran red that day. You stay inside for 3 days after that, not out of fear, but out of mourning. You don't even know her name, but you remember her dancing, you remember her laughter, and now that laughter is gone, silenced. But even as Rome turns up the heat, something unexpected happens. The god gets quieter. You notice it in the rites, fewer visions, fewer trances. The music doesn't hit quite as hard. The wine doesn't carry you as far. It's like Bacchus has withdrawn slightly. Watching, waiting. You ask Albania if she feels it too. She nods slowly. He's watching what we do next. It's a strange thing to be left by a god not out of punishment, but trust. Bacchus knows what's coming. He's letting you decide how to survive it. And you do survive, for now. One night, a secret rite is held in a cave outside the city, a place only the oldest initiates know. No more than 12 people, no masks, no frenzy, just silence, candlelight, and stories. People speak of their first visions, their dreams, the moment they stop being afraid of their own bodies, their own voices. You speak too, not of rituals or flames or wine, but of the first time you knew you weren't alone, that you belonged to something bigger, something older than Rome, older than gods, older than language, something wild and holy. You don't cry, but someone else does. And for a moment the air feels different, like the god has leaned in, quietly from wherever he's hiding, and placed a hand on your shoulder. Not to guide, not to lead, just to remind you he's still here, not in statues, in you. The storm doesn't announce itself with lightning. It creeps in on sandaled feet and folded scrolls. Rome doesn't scream when it wants to kill something, it whispers. And tonight, it whispers your name. You hear about the first round of raids, not from Albania, not from the Safe House network, but from a grocer. An old man with a crooked spine and a cart full of bruised pears. He's never spoken to you before, doesn't even know your face, but this morning, he sides you a note tucked into the fruit and mutters, "Don't go home." You don't. Instead, you head to the taverna in the Subura where the walls are thin and the floors creak like old bones. It used to be one of your favourite places. Laughter, wine, dusty daylight spilling through slatted windows. But now it's dark, quiet. You press your back to the door and listen. Inside, someone is crying. It's not Albania. It's one of the initiates. You remember his mask more than his face. A young man with a wild laugh who once danced barefoot in the rain, chanting for Bacchus to send him a lover or a lion. He's folded into himself now, whispering, "They came for my sister. She wasn't even in the cult, just knew I was." It begins to hit you in waves. This isn't a sweep. It's a purge. Albania arrives just before nightfall. Her hood is gone. Her hair is undone. She's not hiding anymore. They've arrested over 6,000, she says, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere beyond the wall. Men, women, even children. Anyone suspected of participation. Anyone who doesn't deny. You ask if they've been tried. She laughs bitterly. They don't need trials. They have stories. You remember Livy's version, the one Rome will preserve like a holy writ. He claimed the Bacchanalia were a front for crime, deception, debauchery, that the cult operated like a syndicate where initiates swore oaths not to the gods but to each other, where they plotted murder, rape, treason, all behind masks and under moonlight. You remember thinking, even in your early days, that some of it might be true. That some rites did lose control, but most were just people looking for something they weren't allowed to want. And now all of it, true, exaggerated or invented, is being used as a weapon. Albania has a list, names, places. She unrolls it across the wine-stained table and points to 3 spots, a bakery, a villa, a crypt beneath a collapsed temple. They're still out there, she says, and they're still worshipping. You volunteer without hesitation. The first is the bakery. You go in disguise, a flour-stained tunic, a crust of bread in hand. The baker is a woman in her 60s. She doesn't look at you, doesn't speak. Just motions to the back, past the ovens. You slip behind a shelf and descend a narrow stairwell that smells of yeast and ash. There, beneath the city, are 6 people, kneeling, candles lit. One of them is humming a hymn so soft it feels like a lullaby. They stop when they see you. One asks, "Are you the one with the list?" You nod. No rites tonight. No wine, just quiet. You stay until the last candle flickers out. The villa is harder, heavily guarded. The woman who owns it is the widow of a senator who once spoke against the Bacchanalia. Irony, it turns out, is not dead. She opens the door herself, silver hair twisted into a knot, eyes sharp as needles. "Thought you'd never come," she says, handing you a carved wooden bowl. "Give this to whoever makes it to the crypt." You ask what's in it. "Hope," she says, "and a little salt." You don't ask again. The crypt is the most dangerous. It's part of a burned-out temple that collapsed years ago in a lightning strike, an omen Rome interpreted as divine punishment. But you know better. The temple was empty. The only thing struck was a piece of history no one wanted to protect. The entrance is a crack behind a stone slab. You slip in at dusk, scraping your elbow, breathing dust. It's cold inside. Not a living soul, just remnants. Burned thirsty. A broken mask. A goblet overturned beside a small pile of coins. You sit there, bowl in your lap, and feel the weight of all of it. Not just your journey, everyone's. The slaves who danced their joy in secret. The women who chanted in languages Rome refused to learn. The lovers who kissed without shame. The believers, the seekers. The ones who saw a god not as a marble statue or a stern father, but as something wild and radiant and real. You place the bowl on the floor. Whisper a word you don't remember learning. It sounds like stay. Then you rise and leave. That night, word reaches you of a public execution. 5 initiates dragged into the forum and accused of plotting to poison the aqueducts. No evidence, no trial, just spectacle. Albinia doesn't flinch when she hears it, but you notice her hands shaking. "I think," she says quietly, "that this is what he meant when Bacchus said you have to break." You don't argue, because you know what she means. The god isn't gone. He's breaking us on purpose. He's testing the root system, seeing who bends, who snaps, who sings through it. And Rome thinks it's winning. But the truth is, every execution plants a seed. Every arrest tells a story someone else will whisper to someone else. And before you know it, the myth has grown legs again. Not in the groves, in the memory, in the blood. You begin writing your own version of the story, not on parchment, on walls, behind bricks, in wax tablets with double meanings. A phrase here, a symbol there. You draw the thyrsus behind a statue of Jupiter. You scratch the word evoe into a guardhouse door at midnight. They can ban the rites, but they can't ban what you've become, because the cult was never just rituals and wine and chanting in groves. It was a reclamation of power, of identity, of the right to scream when you need to scream and dance when you feel like burning. The next day you wake to news of another name on the list. Yours. Someone saw you. Maybe during a rite. Maybe sneaking out of the temple ruins. Does not matter. You're on the list now. Congratulations. You're officially a threat to the Empire. You burn the mask, not out of betrayal, out of necessity. You wait until nightfall, slip into a hidden courtyard behind an abandoned workshop and set the edge of it alight with a wick soaked in oil. It takes time. The painted wood doesn't want to go. It cracks, curls, splits apart slowly like it's mourning its own destruction. You don't look away. You watch every second of it. And when it's finally ash, you grind the remains into the dirt with your heel. Then you walk out barefoot. It's symbolic, sure, but it's also strategy. Because being on the list means you no longer have the luxury of sentiment. You can't afford to carry tokens, to leave trails, to cling to the sacred like it's armor. From now on, the only thing that protects you is the same thing that's trying to destroy you, your anonymity. Rome doesn't need your name, it just needs someone to blame. And now that you're a target, you become something else entirely. You become the shadow the Senate is afraid of. The next few days are a blur of smoke, ink, and breath held in alleys. You sleep in places you never thought you'd lie down, grain silos, wine barrels, abandoned shrines to forgotten household gods. You live off barley and luck. Every time a patrol passes, your pulse stutters. Every time a torch flickers, you wonder if it's coming for you. And yet somehow, you find others. They're everywhere, hiding in plain sight. A man sweeping the temple steps who traces a thyrsus shape in the dust with his broom. A merchant's daughter who slips you a loaf of bread with a grape carved into the crust. An old woman who mumbles nonsense on street corners until she mutters your name and tells you where the next safe house is. It's like the cult has learned to survive by becoming the city itself. The rites are no longer ceremonies, they're messages, whisperers, exchanges of glances at just the right moment. You've heard of a group now meeting in the catacombs beneath the Appian Way. Another that disguises their chants as lullabies. A few even hold mock theatre performances, Dionysian tragedies, where the true meaning is hidden in the pauses and the masks. You reach one of these gatherings late one night. It's in a villa converted into a performance hall. Officially, the show is a comedy about foolish lovers and mistaken identities, but beneath the laughter there's a current. You see it in the way the chorus moves, serpentine, deliberate. You hear it in a phrase repeated 3 times in Greek. You feel it in the way the audience exhales together. When a masked figure holds a goblet above his head and whispers something you know, even from across the room, he is still with us. After the show, you slip through the crowd and find the performer outside, removing his mask with trembling hands. He looks like someone who's just survived a lightning strike. They were watching at least 3 officials. I could feel it. You ask why he took the risk. He smiles, teeth white and wet in the moonlight. Because silence is harder than dying. You walk away before he can say more. Because he's right. And it terrifies you. That night you dream of the grove again. But it's different this time. It's burning, the ivy is aflame, the altar has split in 2. The statues are weeping blood, not with violence but grief. And in the centre of it all, Bacchus stands, barefoot and grinning. Not the cruel grin, the knowing one, like he's already seen how this ends and isn't worried. You wake with the taste of ash in your mouth. Albinia sends word the next day through a boy selling oranges. A message hidden inside the peel. It's time. The scroll is ready. You head to the meeting point, a broken aqueduct covered in moss and graffiti. She's waiting beneath one of the arches, hooded, holding a leather-wrapped bundle close to her chest. The god gave us stories, she says quietly, but Rome will only preserve the ones that serve it. If we don't write our truth, Livy will write it for us. You take the bundle and feel its weight, heavier than it should be. Inside is the scroll, a record of the real Bacchanalia, not the Senate's version, not the horror stories, yours, Albinia's, Junior's, the dances, the grief, the masks, the dreams. It's not chronological, it doesn't follow laws or logic. It's chaos stitched into poetry, just like the god it honours. Get it out of the city, she says. You nod. And then you ask the question that's been chewing at you for weeks. What if I don't make it? She reaches into her sleeve and pulls out a necklace, a small amulet shaped like a pine cone. Worn, smooth, old. He will, she says, even if you don't. You leave that night. There's no fanfare, no farewell ritual, no dramatic parting words, just the dirt under your sandals, the scroll pressed to your ribs, and the city falling silent behind you. You travel under darkness, avoiding the main roads. The guards are tighter now, checkpoints every mile. You don't speak, you don't sleep. On the 3rd day you make it to a farmhouse near the Tiber's Bend. The woman who answers the door doesn't ask who you are, just opens her arms and lets you in. There, in a cellar, lined with jars of olives and dried fruit, you unroll the scroll. She reads it slowly. Halfway through she begins to cry. You don't ask why, you know. She makes a copy, then another. By morning, 3 people have read it. By the end of the week, 15. A month later, someone performs it aloud in a fishing village on the coast. Just fragments whispered under a sky so black it swallows stars. That's how it begins, not with fire, not with an altar, but with memory. A cult isn't just gatherings, it's persistence, it's refusal. It's keeping the rhythm alive even when the drums are taken away. The scroll is no longer yours, it's everyone's, and the god, he doesn't dance in the groves anymore. He dances in the margins, where no empire can follow. You spend the next season on the move, not because you're being hunted, though that's still true, but because the scroll spreads faster than you expected. Like fire in dry grass. 1 copy becomes 3, 3 become 10, and soon every village from Latium to Campania seems to hum with fragments of the text. You hear children chanting pieces of it as skipping rhymes. You see verses scrawled in charcoal beneath bridges. In one town, a painted fresco of a man with grapes for hair winks at you from behind a baker's stall. Bacchus is slipping through the cracks again, and somehow the Senate knows. They've doubled the guards on all roads into Rome, scribal shops are being raided, temple priests are being interrogated, even libraries are under suspicion. You hear that any texts mentioning Bacchus, even in reference to vineyards or theatre, are being collected and either revised or lost. You've seen this before, that tight grip, that desperate attempt to control the narrative, to make history read the way they want it to. But Rome doesn't understand the god they're fighting. Bacchus doesn't live in scrolls, he lives in story, in voice, in what people tell each other when no one's listening. You meet a man in a mountain village near Cumae, a potter, sun-wrinkled and quiet. His fingers are stained with red clay, and his cups are painted with deer, dancers, and the faintest outline of a vine winding up a leg. He offers you wine served in one of his own vessels. You walk like someone who's seen him, he says. You nod. I have too, he says, tapping his temple. Here, during a fever. Or maybe it was the wine, doesn't matter. He left something behind. He lifts a jug to show you the symbol scratched into the clay near the base, 3 circles interlocked with a single dot in the centre. You've seen that mark before. It's a sign from the scroll, one of the earliest ones. Supposedly meaningless, but now it's everywhere. A new symbol for an old truth. The potter tells you people come from miles away just to touch his jugs, as if the clay itself carries the god. He doesn't advertise, doesn't speak Bacchus's name, but the meaning is clear. He's changing the potter says, becoming what we need him to be. You leave the village the next morning, and those words cling to you, because that's the secret Rome will never understand. Gods evolve. They don't need temples or senators' permission slips. They flow into the space between laws, between pages, between generations. Bacchus isn't dying, he's adapting. You begin collecting these stories as you travel, little offerings, a grandmother who claims she heard music in her cellar after her son's funeral, a teenage boy who carved verses from the scroll into the handle of his shepherd's staff, a former soldier who now sings to grapevines before harvest. They all say different things, but the message is always the same. He's still here. You send word back to Albania through a smuggler who trades in salt and poetry. You're not sure if she'll ever get it, but you hope. The message is simple. It's working. But even as the new faith spreads, the crackdown gets worse. Rome, in its brilliance, has decided to embrace the oldest trick in the book, spectacle. You hear about public burnings, not people, yet, but masks, costumes, objects confiscated from raids. They pile them in the forum and torch them in front of cheering crowds, pretending it's cleansing. But you know what it really is? Fear. Because fire always means fear. One night in the port city of Ostia, you attend a secret gathering in the back room of a fishmonger's shop. It's small, intimate, no masks, no loud chants, just storytelling. Someone passes around a cup of wine and begins reciting a verse from the scroll, their voice trembling. He who walks backward through the grove sees not trees, but faces of gods forgotten by marble. The room goes still, and then someone else begins humming a melody, an old one that used to be sung at the end of rites, when the fire died down and everyone lay in the dirt, hearts still pounding. You hum along, everyone does, and in that moment the room feels like the grove again. No masks, no altar. Just presence. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the night. Some scholars believe the Bacchanalia wasn't just a religious movement, it was a form of protest theatre. They argue that the masks, the dancing, the reversal of social roles, even the trance-like performances, were all acts of resistance disguised as worship, a political masquerade. If that's true, then you're not just preserving a religion, you're fueling a resistance, and Rome hates resistance. The next day soldiers sweep the marketplace. They arrest a boy selling figs, say he was singing hymns. He couldn't have been older than 12. You hear the snap of his mother's voice as she screams after him, her cries swallowed by the clang of iron and the stomp of boots. You want to intervene? You don't, because if you do, you'll be caught. You walk away with your hands clenched and your throat full of glass. That night you write down the boy's name. You scratch it into the underside of a clay cup and bury it in the sand behind the idol. This sin. No one will see it. No one will know it's there, except Bacchus. He'll remember. He remembers everything. Later, you sit alone near the docks, feet dangling over the black water. You sip from a flask and watch the ships come and go. Somewhere in the dark, someone's playing a flute. Not well, but the notes still make your heart twitch. You think of Junior, of Syra, of the masked boy who once begged the god for a lion. You think of Albania, wherever she is, walking the edge of fire with a scroll in her cloak and wine on her breath. And you think of yourself, not as a fugitive, not as a priest, not even as an initiate, just as someone who said yes to the wild. You stand, stretch, and whisper the god's name into the sea breeze, not loudly, just enough for him to hear, and from somewhere in the dark the wind replies. Soon, you don't expect the rites to survive, and yet, there they are, hiding like roots beneath scorched earth. You return to Rome in the dead of winter when the city huddles beneath grey skies and cloaks itself in smoke and silence. There's no grand purpose for your return, no mission. You just feel pulled, like something unfinished is still echoing between the stone and the stars. The gates are heavily guarded now, even as beggars are inspected. You slip in under the guise of a grain vendor's assistant, hauling sacks of barley you can barely carry. The guard barely looks at you. His attention is on a scroll nailed to the gate wall, another decree. You recognise the language even before you read it. Bold, righteous, full of verbs that promise safety and words that mean control. It declares that the cult of Bacchus has been eradicated. You smile to yourself. That's cute. Because if anything, it's evolved. The first safe house you visit isn't where it used to be. The tavern's gone, burned. In its place is a statue of Minerva, goddess of wisdom, which you admit is a decent irony. You find the new location by following a trail of grape leaves scratched into the mortar of alley walls. They lead to a bakery you remember vaguely, a place that always smelled more like smoke than bread. The woman behind the counter doesn't speak, just nods towards the back. You pass through flour-dusted curtains into a storage room stacked with amphorae and sacks of barley. It smells of yeast and warm stone. There are 6 people waiting. You don't recognise any of them, but they recognise you. "You're the one with the scroll," one whispers. You nod once, no more. They tell you what's been happening in your absence. The crackdowns, the informants, the sudden disappearances, but also the persistence. The way the rites have changed, grown smaller, more symbolic. There are no more full rituals, not like before, but there are moments. One woman describes how she sings to her bread dough before baking, whispering Bacchic verses into the wheat. Another man says he carves sacred lines into his cutting boards. A young girl confesses to painting vines on her walls with beet juice, careful to hide them under layers of plaster. None of it is loud, but all of it is worship. You listen to every story, Mythology, and you realise something. This isn't survival, it's metamorphosis. The cult hasn't died, it's just grown quiet. Quieter than Rome can hear, and quiet things, when they grow, are hard to kill. You leave the bakery with a small satchel of dried herbs and a folded bit of parchment. No one says goodbye. There's no need. You're all pieces of the same flame now, scattered, yes, but still burning. That night you visit the grove, or what's left of it. The path is almost gone. Ivy swallows everything. The altar is buried beneath mud and thorns. You can barely find the stone where you once lay after your first dance, breathless and reborn. You light a single candle and sit, for hours. There's no music, no drums, no wine, just you and the cold and the whisper of the wind. You expect nothing. So when you hear the voice, you think at first it's memory. It isn't. It's Albania. She steps out from the shadows slowly, like she's made of mist. Her cloak is patched. Her eyes are tired, but she's smiling. "I thought I might find you here," she says. You don't speak. You just stand and pull her into a long, silent embrace. She smells of myrrh and dust, and something faintly like rosemary. She tells you she's been working with a small group, not worshipping exactly, recording, transcribing the stories of the survivors, the rites, the visions, the betrayals, the joys, every thread of the tapestry written by hand on rough parchment and sealed in wax. "We're building a new archive," she says, "not for now, for later, for whoever comes next." And that's when she shows you the newest piece, a map, not of roads, of groves, hidden ones, secret gardens, forgotten wells, places across the empire where the god has been felt, where songs have been sung, where symbols were carved into tree trunks before Rome ever had a name. She calls it the Wild Path. Bacchus isn't just in Rome anymore, she says. He's everywhere. Everywhere they tried to erase him, he rooted deeper. You hold the map and feel something inside you crack, just slightly, not in pain, in relief, because you finally understand the scope of this. The Bacchanalia isn't just a cult anymore. It's a current, a network, a myth wearing new faces, new clothes, speaking in new languages, a slow-moving tide beneath the surface of empire, and it's growing. That night you and Albinia drink cheap wine from tin cups beside what used to be the altar. You pour a few drops onto the earth and whisper the old hymns under your breath. Then you look up at the sky. It's cloudless, full of stars, and for a brief moment you see something move among them. Not a god, not exactly, but a shape, a shimmer, like vines twisting across the heavens. And you remember a fringe theory you once heard from an old man in the hills, that Dionysus wasn't born of a woman or a god, but of story itself, that every time someone tells a tale they weren't supposed to tell, Bacchus is reborn a little more. You laugh softly and raise your cup. To stories, you say. Albinia raises hers. To survival. And you both drink. It doesn't taste like victory. It tastes like truth. You sleep in the grove that night for the first time in months. No dreams, just a drumbeat. Low, steady, still there. The message arrives in the form of a broken olive branch, left carefully outside the window of a bathhouse where you've been sleeping in short shifts. It's not a threat, it's a code, an old one. A symbol used when the cult was still young and cautious, long before the Senate had noticed it. One branch, broken clean and left pointing east, means a new gathering, a new rite. The others are already on the move. You find Albinia at dawn kneeling by the Tiber, pouring a small libation into the river. The sun hasn't climbed yet, and everything is tinted grey and pink, like the world hasn't finished being painted. She doesn't look up as you approach. "He's back," she says softly. You don't have to ask who. You feel it too. You've felt him for days now, pressing against the world like a heartbeat under skin. The cult isn't large anymore, but it doesn't need to be. It's dense now, concentrated, stripped down to its core, and something in that has made the presence of the god stronger, sharper. You remember what Albinia said before, he's watching what we do next. Well, now he's done watching. You follow her upriver for half a day until you reach the old vineyard, long abandoned, its vines dead and twisted like skeletal fingers. It's not a grove, not a temple, just rows of earth and silence. But this is where they've chosen, a rebirth site. It has to be somewhere new, somewhere clean. The others begin to arrive in small groups. There's no procession. No pageantry, just quiet greetings, familiar nods, a few tearful reunions. You recognise faces you thought lost, some marked with fresh scars, others pale and wide-eyed, like they've been hiding underground for seasons. One man carries a satchel that smells strongly of ink and mildew. Another brings nothing but a single loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. Albinia takes charge without speaking. She draws a line in the dirt with her heel, then a circle around it, enclosing a small space in the dead vines. It isn't formal, it's instinct. The rite begins at dusk, and it's nothing like the others. No flutes, no frenzy, no dancing until collapse. Just a circle of people sitting close, legs tucked under themselves, hands in their laps or on each other's shoulders. A stillness that feels not empty but pregnant, as if every moment is swollen with potential. Someone begins to speak. It's not a chant, not a prayer, just a story. They tell of their first vision, a dream of the god in the form of a fox, leading them through a cave where every echo spoke a different truth. The next person speaks of their arrest, how they stayed silent, even when the guards broke their nose and spat in their food. Another tells of their daughter who danced in the last unbroken grove and sang until her voice gave out. You go next. You speak of your first mask, of how it scared you, how it fit you too well, of Junior and the scroll and the potter's quiet eyes, of the boy arrested for singing fig songs. When you finish, no one claps, no one nods. They don't need to. You've offered a piece of yourself, that's enough. The bread is passed around next, torn into uneven pieces. No wine, only water from the Tiber, poured into a single goblet and shared slowly. It's not about intoxication anymore. It's about presence. You sip and hand it on, the rim still warm from someone else's lips, and then, without cue, someone begins to hum. It's not a song you know, at least not consciously. but your throat picks it up anyway. It passes around the circle, a low, vibrating note that grows richer with every voice added. Not harmony, something older, something primal. And in the middle of that sound, something happens. Not a vision, not exactly. It's more like remembering. You remember what it felt like to lie in the grove your first night, staring up at the stars through ivy-soaked lashes. You remember the scream of the woman who saw her dead husband in a goat's eyes. You remember Corvinus, arrogant, misguided, but burning with belief. You remember Junia, her fig, her eyes, her wild, beautiful anger. And then you see him, not with your eyes, with yourself. Bacchus, not as a man or a beast or a god with vines in his hair, but as a force, a curve in the universe, a gap in the machine, a crack where the light of truth seeps through and says, you don't have to be what they told you to be. You feel him, not standing above the group, but within it. Every breath, every story, every scar. You open your eyes, and the others are still humming. Tears track silently down someone's cheeks. Another smiles softly, fingers pressed to their own heart. No one needs to speak, because now you know. The cult isn't a set of rituals or symbols or verses carved into clay. It's not even the scroll. It's the rhythm. The shared rhythm that says, we are wild and we are free and we will not vanish just because you want us to. When the sound finally fades, it doesn't end, it rests, like a song waiting for its next note. Albinia stands, stretches her back and says, he never needed us to be loud. You nod. You finally understand what she meant all those months ago. Bacchus doesn't demand worship. He doesn't hunger for temples or gold or sacrifice. He only ever asks for one thing: honesty. The honesty to be messy, joyful, angry, ecstatic, broken, loving, loud, quiet, and entirely fully human. You leave the vineyard in the early morning mist. The others scatter silently into the hills and alleys and ruins, taking their stories with them. The cult disappears again, not in defeat, but in purpose, in clarity. You walk back into the city with nothing in your hands. No mask, no scroll, no wine, but everything you need is inside you now, because the god doesn't need to be invoked anymore. He's awake, and he walks beside you, in the rhythm of your steps, in the glint of your laughter when no one's watching, in the way you look at a statue and remember. You notice the shift in power long before Rome does, not in politics, not in laws or senatorial squabbling, but in posture, in the way women begin walking a little straighter, in the way they stop apologising for being loud in the marketplace, in how they look each other in the eye, in how they start looking up. You sit in a weaving house near the Aventine pretending to help, which mostly means staying out of the way while your hands cramp around a spindle. The women there aren't initiates, not openly, but their laughter carries a rhythm you recognise. A young girl, barely 12, hums a familiar hymn under her breath as she beats cloth against a frame. Another offers a cup of watered wine with a wink that says, I know what you are. The owner, a widow named Prisca, makes no effort to hide the carved Thyrsus symbol hung behind the door. When you ask if she's afraid of being reported, she snorts. Let them come, she says, yanking a knot tight with a snap. They've been trying to silence us since the first fire was stolen. It didn't work then either. That's when you realise what no historian will ever admit. The Bacchanalia was never a cult. It was a revolution dressed in perfume and grape skins. The rites weren't about wine or madness or even gods. They were about access, space, power, because in Rome divinity was rationed. You could worship, sure, but only in sanctioned temples, in approved ways or under the watchful eye of men in spotless white togas. The gods weren't for you, they were for the Republic. They reinforced the world as it was. But Bacchus? He flipped the table. He told women they could speak in tongues and be heard. He told slaves they were worthy of visions. He told lovers of any kind, yes, even that kind, that ecstasy was sacred, not shameful. He told the broken that they didn't need to be healed to be holy. He told the angry to scream, and he told everyone else to listen. You begin hearing stories about how it all started. The pieces are scattered, conflicting, half wrapped in myth, but one thread stays consistent. It was the women who brought the rites in, southern Italy probably. Campanian women, Oscan women, Etruscan women. Albinia once told you about a priestess named Pecula Annia, who opened the rites to men and moved the ceremonies to the night. Rome called her a threat, a corrupter, but really, she was a door, and once a woman opens a door in Rome, gods help the man who tries to close it. You meet a former Vestal in a bathhouse one afternoon. She's older now, her once-shaved head covered in short curls. She left the temple, retired officially, but you can hear the edge in her voice when she speaks of it. The suffocation, the purity, held like a blade to her throat, the silence she was taught to keep sacred. She attends the new rites now, not the loud ones, the intimate ones, the ones where 5 or 6 women meet in a storeroom and whisper truth into bowls of wine. You sit in on one. No masks, just breathing. One by one, each woman speaks something she was never allowed to say aloud. My father told me my thoughts were not fit for gods. My husband made me bathe before I could touch our household altar. My son asked me why the priest didn't let women speak. I had no answer. I still dream of screaming inside the temple, not out of fear, out of joy. You say nothing. You don't need to. Their words are a rite, and Bacchus is listening. He has always listened, and especially to women. Rome saw him as feminine, too soft, too fluid, too emotional. Not like Mars with his iron and blood, or Jupiter, with his judgment and thunder. Bacchus wore flowing robes. He wept, he danced, he embraced. His power wasn't domination, it was invitation. And that's what scared them, not his wildness, his openness. And now that openness is spreading again. You see it in the streets, in glances shared between women who know. You see it in the way laundresses gather behind the taberna after dark. You hear it in lullabies mothers hum to their children, melodies that slide sideways into Bacchic hymns. You see it in the stories Rome tries to bury, like Hispala Facenia, the freedwoman who testified during the crackdown, painted by Livy as a woman of low virtue but high use. She warned about the rites, supposedly, gave the Senate their ammunition, but the more you listen, the more you wonder if the truth is harder. What if she didn't betray the cult? What if her words were twisted, or taken under duress? What if she was just a woman trying to survive? And Junia, you haven't spoken her name in weeks, not out of fear, out of reverence. You still don't know what happened to her, but her memory follows you like perfume. Every time you light a candle, every time you pass a fig tree, every time a young girl raises her eyes a little too boldly in the forum. She'd be proud of them. You hope she's still watching. You return to the weaving house one evening to find a new woman there, tall, older, wrapped in a deep indigo cloak. She introduces herself simply as Aelia and takes a seat beside you at the loom. She hums while she works, low, steady, a song you haven't heard in years. You ask where she learned it. She smiles without turning. My grandmother. She said it was a lullaby. Later I found it carved into a temple wall near Veii. A pause. Do you ever wonder how far back this goes? You do. Sometimes you wonder if the rites weren't born in Italy at all. Maybe they came from the east, as the scholars say. From Phrygia, from Thrace, from some mountain where people still danced with animal skins and flutes under stars. Or maybe they came from within, from the universal scream that builds in anyone forced to be something smaller than they are. You wonder if the Bacchanalia was never introduced to Rome. Maybe it emerged from it. You sit with Aelia until dusk, weaving and humming. Before she leaves, she hands you a folded square of linen. Inside is a thyrsus embroidered in purple thread. The stitching is rough, not perfect, but it pulses with meaning. These are our new masks, she says. Soft ones, quiet ones, but just as powerful. You wear it the next night at a gathering beneath a collapsed aqueduct. There are no men there, not because they're not allowed, but because they didn't need to be. That night, a girl no older than 10 tells the group with absolute conviction that Bacchus told her she was made of stars. No one questions her, no one laughs. A woman beside you begins to cry, and you feel it again. That presence, that breath, that rhythm. The god is not gone, he's just changed clothes. You hear his name whispered like a curse first. Publius Ebutius, the boy who broke the silence. The one who turned the key that opened the cage. The one who cried wolf and found a pack of senators waiting, sharpening their knives. You don't meet him, he's long gone. But his story hangs over the cult like a bad taste in the mouth, like vinegar spilled into honeyed wine. Everyone knows something about him, and the versions never quite match. In one, he's a disillusioned initiate, betrayed by his lover and looking for revenge. In another, he's a wide-eyed youth manipulated by his family, used as a pawn to crack open the rites. And then there's the version you hear from an old woman selling roasted chickpeas near the Capitoline, who swears he was possessed by the god himself and forced to speak. He wept wine, she tells you, pressing a paper-wrapped cone into your hand. Not blood, not tears, wine. It sounds ridiculous. And yet you've seen stranger. You finally track down someone who knew him. Not closely, but enough. A former friend of his mother's. A woman named Vibia, who runs a candle stall in a forgotten corner of the city, where the wax melts faster than it should, and the flames flicker even when there's no wind. Publius wasn't evil, she says, melting beeswax over a low flame. He was scared, and fear can do terrible things. She tells you the basics. The version even Livy couldn't twist too much. Publius a Beauteous, young and well-born, son of a respected equestrian family. His father dead, his mother controlling, his guardians concerned. He begins to attend Bacchic rites, led there perhaps by a lover, a freedman named Minius Quirinius. There's ecstasy, yes, passion, secrets, and then something shifts. He went too deep, Vibia says, and then he tried to pull out, but Bacchus doesn't like that. Not always. The god opens you up. If you try to close again, it hurts. What happens next is the part no one agrees on. Publius accuses the cult of treachery. He tells the authorities about orgies, his poisonings, murder plots. He claims that the rites are no longer rites at all, but conspiracies wearing divine masks. His mother and her lover, Sulpicia and Hispala, depending on the version, are both implicated. One disappears, the other testifies. Rome listens, because Rome has been listening. They just needed the right voice. And Publius gives it to them, whether willingly or not. The Senate acts quickly. The Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus is drafted, ostensibly in the name of public safety. But you know better. This is not about crime. This is about fear. Fear of wildness. Fear of power slipping through fingers. Fear of women, slaves, foreigners and dreamers speaking to gods without permission. Publius becomes a symbol, a martyr to control. The scrolls say he was rewarded. Vibia shakes her head. They gave him a stipend and a sword and sent him somewhere no one could find him, she says. A man who breaks open a mystery doesn't get to keep his own. He gave them the cult and they took him too. You leave her stall with a head full of questions and the scent of wax in your clothes. That night you light one of her candles in the window of a rented room above a butcher shop, watching the flame dance against the glass. You try to imagine him, Publius. Standing before the Senate, heart pounding, hands trembling. A boy with too much knowledge and nowhere to put it. You don't pity him, but you don't hate him either. He was a tool, Rome was the hand. You begin to see the cracks in the story the city tells about itself. The version written in marble and recited in the forums. The one where order is sacred and chaos is always foreign. You realise Rome needs enemies, invents them when necessary, because it cannot afford introspection. It cannot ask, what if the people dancing in the woods were right? And maybe that's why the rites were so dangerous. Not because they plotted to overthrow the state, but because they offered an alternative. What if power wasn't about dominance? What if ecstasy was wisdom? What if the gods didn't live in temples but in the parts of you you're taught to bury? That's what Publius tried to kill when he spoke, not a cult, a possibility. And yet, even in the heart of betrayal, the cult survived. Because some truths are immune to exposure. Some things, once seen, can't be unseen. You meet Albinia again 2 nights later. She's been in hiding, moving through the city like a shadow with a heartbeat. She wears new clothes now, nothing dramatic, just simpler, or less priestess, more messenger. She hands you a small scroll, no seal, no warning. You unroll it and find a copy of Publius's original testimony. An early one, smuggled out before the censors polished it. It's less damning than expected, clumsy even. You can tell it was written by someone unsure of what they saw. He describes rituals, masks, loud singing. Claims to have witnessed an orgy, but admits he left before it ended. Says he feared what might happen, not that it did. Albinia folds her arms. They built an empire on that might. You ask where she got it. Someone in the archive. Quiet. Discreet. Not ready to believe Rome's version anymore. You stare at the ink. It's faded, smudged, like even the parchment didn't want to hold it. You ask what she wants you to do with it. Albinia shrugs. Nothing, or everything. Burn it, bury it. Show it to the next child who asks why we light candles at night. You keep it, of course. Not because it's sacred, but because it's a reminder that even the gods can be betrayed, and even then they endure. You think about that as you walk the streets, slipping between market stalls and temple steps, watching as the city pretends nothing ever happened. The forum is loud again, the baths are busy, the masks are gone, the names erased. The Senate believes it won, and maybe in a way it did, but you know better. You know that truth doesn't need temples, it just needs memory, and memory is stubborn. You pass a child drawing with chalk in the dust. She's making spirals, 3 circles interlocked with a dot in the middle. No, you ask her where she learned it. My sister, she says. She said it's a game. You nod and walk on, because the game is still being played. And Bacchus? He's just waiting for his next turn. Rome writes the narrative. That's what it does best. Not just victories and architecture and heroic lineages, but the fine art of the official story, the one carved in stone, pressed into scrolls, performed in the Senate, repeated until no one dares ask what's missing. And the Bacchanalia? Rome turned that into a story too. A neat, moralised warning about what happens when boundaries blur and people forget their place. The version they tell is Livy's. Always Livy's, written decades after the crackdown, as if distance made it truer. You read it one night in the corner of a dusty library, tucked behind a temple archive where no one expects a former initiate to be flipping through official histories. You sit in the shadows, scroll unrolling under your fingers, and read the words of a man who never set foot in the grove, who never wore a mask, who never heard the god's voice thrum through the bones of the earth. He writes of depravity, excess, a cult grown monstrous in the dark. He describes women leading men into sin, slaves whispering oaths of secrecy, initiations involving blood and threat and seduction. He claims the Bacchanalia threatened the very fabric of Rome, not just its laws, but its identity. You almost laugh. Because of course it did. But not in the way he means. It didn't threaten to overthrow Rome by conspiracy. It threatened to expose that Rome's version of order, patriarchal, hierarchical, brutal, was just one flavour of chaos, and a boring one at that. Livy writes that the cult's rituals included sexual rites, poisonings, murder, and false accusations, that the initiates could cry Bacchus and have someone killed in the dark without consequence, that women conspired against their husbands and slaves plotted rebellion, that masks weren't just masks, they were camouflage for revolution. And maybe, in his own way, Livy wasn't lying. You remember the rites, the real ones, the frenzy, yes, the tears, yes, the laughter, the wine, the wildness that made you feel like your skin no longer belonged to a state or a name or a father's inheritance. You remember the initiates, how many of them were women, outsiders, people who were never supposed to hold power, much less stand on equal ground with the senator's son in a grove by torchlight. Maybe Livy saw the truth. He just couldn't bear it. Because if it wasn't a conspiracy, if it wasn't sedition or madness or moral decay, then it was something worse. It was a choice to live differently, to feel differently, to worship in a way that didn't require marble altars or government approval. You roll the scroll closed and slip it back into its slot. No one stops you. No one even looks up. Livy's version will be read long after your dust. That's how Rome works. It canonizes control. But outside there's another version being written. You meet a woman named Thalna near the Quirinal. She's Etruscan, older, with a voice like rusted bronze and a mouth that speaks Latin like she's rolling it in her teeth before spitting it out. She has a little garden behind her house, growing herbs that smell like thunder when they're crushed. She shows you her own scroll. It's short, barely a dozen lines, but it pulses with memory. She's writing her own Bacchic account, not for Rome, for her granddaughter. I won't let the state teach her who I was, she says, eyes glinting. I'll do it myself. You help her write more. The rituals, the music, the soft hands, the wine songs, the goat who wandered through a rite and was crowned instead of killed, the dreams, the fear, the moments that didn't make it into Livy's cold paragraphs. You begin collecting more stories. A former initiate who now performs puppet shows with masks styled after maenads. A painter who hides Bacchic symbols inside religious murals, vine leaves curling into holy halos. A midwife who swears the god still visits her in labour rooms, whispering comfort when no one else dares speak. You see it happening. A quiet counter-history. No statues, no proclamations, just the truth, written in the margins. And Rome doesn't notice, because it never looks in the margins. You and Albania meet in the shade of a fig tree one morning. The fruit is ripe and sticky, and the juice stains your fingers as you eat. You hand her a wax tablet filled with fragments, chants, recipes for ritual wine, parts of a hymn recorded phonetically from memory. She reads it in silence, then wipes her fingers on her cloak. "We're going to outlast them," she says. "Not with armies, not with riots, with persistence, with truth." You tell her about Livy's scroll, about the slander, the exaggeration. She nods. "Let them lie." She points to the sky. "Bacchus doesn't live in scrolls. He lives in what we do, in what we remember, in what we refuse to forget." Later that week, you see a performance in the Forum, a sanctioned one, a farce, a comedy with a wild-haired character clearly meant to be a mockery of Bacchus, drunk, foolish, stumbling, cowardly. The crowd laughs, children point, guards chuckle, and then, from somewhere in the back row, someone begins to sing a hymn, not loudly, just a phrase, Evo Baccho, others pick it up, one by one, softly, like rain tapping a roof. The actor pauses, the play stumbles, the guards glance around, but no one is doing anything wrong, they're just humming. The crowd moves on, the actors recover, but the hymn stays in the air like perfume. Rome tells its version. But the god dances behind it. You walk home through a street newly paved with coins from the latest conquest. The empire grows, the buildings rise, the fountains gleam. But you know the truth. There are grooves beneath the marble, roots invisible but alive. And if you press your ear to the ground at night, you can hear the rhythm. Not war drums, wine drums. Bacchus never left. He just let Rome think it won. You leave Rome again in early spring. Not by choice exactly, but because staying feels like standing too close to a closed door that still radiates heat from a fire you barely escaped. The city is stable again, on the surface. The Senate has declared the Bacchanalia purged, memory sanitized, story complete. The gods, they say, are back in their place. The temples are quiet, the scrolls approved, the masks gone. Everyone breathes easier, smiles tighter. The silence is almost convincing. But you've learned to listen for the things that don't make sound. So you go, quietly, following the old trade roads and shepherd paths. You move through the countryside where the gods wear different faces. In the cities, divinity is marble and marble doesn't bend. But out here, it stretches, changes, laughs. The first place you stop is a farmstead in the hills of Samnium, where the air tastes like mint and sheep outnumber people. You're not here for worship, you're here for something older than that. Proof. The woman who greets you, Gala, is in her 60s and walks with a limp, but her eyes are knife-bright and suspicious. "You're looking for him, aren't you?" she says, arms crossed. "The great boy, the wild one." You nod once. She laughs and motions for you to follow. In the back of her property, hidden by a wall of dense fig trees, is a hollow dug into the side of a hill. The entrance is blocked by a makeshift wooden door, painted with a symbol you haven't seen in years, the old vine and serpent spiral etched with dirt, not ink. Inside it's cooler. The air is thick with myrrh and soil. There are bones here. Goat, maybe deer. Worn robes. A thyrsus leaning in the corner like it still remembers the hand that held it. "This was a shrine," Gala says softly. "Long before your city, long before your stat." She lights a small lamp. The walls flicker with movement. No, not movement. Paintings, ancient ones, faded by time but still clinging to the stone like ivy to skin. You recognize them. The god in his many shapes. Man, beast, child, storm. A woman dancing, hair ablaze. A pair of lovers devouring a cluster of grapes like they're the last ones in the world. You kneel beside the painting and trace one of the figures. "You came all this way," Gala says, "to see something that was never lost." And she's right. Bacchus didn't just survive the crackdown in Rome, he escaped it. You travel farther. Each town, each village offers some strange echo of the god. In one, a shepherd tells you of a horned spirit who sings at dusk. In another, a widow leaves bowls of wine under her floorboards for the footsteps, she says with a wink. A man in a fishing village performs a yearly ritual involving seawater and rosemary, claiming it's just tradition, but you recognize the melody in his chant. The Bacchic current didn't die. It branched. Sometimes it's only in stories, half-remembered and misnamed. Sometimes it's in festivals that have been stripped of origin, but kept their wildness. And sometimes it's in full, quiet rites held under new names, the celebration of spring, the rite of renewal, the blessing of the vine. You carry copies of the scroll now, sealed in wax and hidden in amphorae, under false labels, olive oil, pressed in Capua. They travel faster than you do, into markets, onto ships, passed from hand to hand, sometimes in full, sometimes as fragments. One copy is delivered to a household in Numidia. Another, you hear, ends up in a merchant's archive in Massilia. You never meet the readers, but every so often someone looks at you just a second too long, smiles, and you know the god is still walking, but it's in the province of Baetica, months later, that you see the most astonishing thing. A full rite, not a whisper, not a symbol scratched into brick, but the real thing. Music, masks, movement. You're led there by a stonemason named Felix, who recognises the thread in your questions. He doesn't say much, just walks you to an olive grove beyond the edge of a sleepy hill town and knocks twice on a twisted tree. A woman emerges from the darkness and leads you down into a small cave. There are only 20 people, maybe fewer. Most are locals. 2 are travellers like you. The air is warm and smells like lavender and smoke. The ritual begins with humming. Then comes the wine, poured over hands, not drunk. You sit, eyes closed, while someone paints a spiral on your forehead with clay. And then the dance begins. It's slow, not the frenzied, full-body tremble of the old Roman rites. This is more like water circling a drain. Gentle, inevitable. You join. You don't think. Your body remembers. And in that moment, the years fall away. You feel like you're back in the grove with Junior and Albinia and the god in your chest, wearing your skin like a festival mask. After the rite, no one speaks for a while. You sit around a low fire and watch the embers settle like stars. One of the women, middle-aged, her hair bound with rosemary, leans toward you and says, "He doesn't need cities, he needs souls." You nod because you've learned that's true. Back in Rome, they talk about Bacchus in the past tense. A warning, a crisis they overcame, an example of how order always wins. But out here, in the hills, in the alleys, in the caves and fields and oceanside shrines, they don't talk about him much at all. They just feel him, and that's the greatest survival. To go unmentioned and unforgettable. To become myth again, not as Rome tells it, but as it lives in whispers and footsteps and songs carried on the wind. You lie under the stars that night, wrapped in a rough wool blanket, and stare up at the wide silence of the sky. No dreams, just the memory of vines growing beneath your skin. And somewhere, far away, or maybe inside you, you hear the faint sound of laughter. The god is amused, and awake. It starts with a tune stuck in your head. Just a few notes, barely more than a breath, but you find yourself humming it as you walk the winding roads through the mountains. You don't remember where you first heard it, maybe at the rites in Baetica, maybe whispered by a shepherd in Umbria, but it clings to you like a scent. As the days pass, you catch others humming it too. A baker in a back alley in Narbo, a child bouncing grapes into a basket in a Tuscan vineyard, a sailor mending nets by the docks in Syracuse. No lyrics, just the melody. 3 notes that sound like a secret being passed from mouth to mouth, and it hits you. The cult isn't just surviving, it's patterning, moving in loops and ripples, embedding itself into places and people in ways that are quiet, almost invisible. Not as an organised rebellion, but as a mood, a presence. And you start to wonder how much of what's happening is intentional. You spend time in Gaul, among merchant towns and villages on the edges of Roman authority, where Latin is spoken with strange music in it and the gods wear foreign faces. There you stumble upon a night festival not dedicated to any Roman deity, but still unmistakably Bacchic. They call it the Night of the Vine, and it happens once a year when the moon is full and the grape leaves have just begun to unfurl. No one mentions Bacchus by name, but they wear wreaths of ivy and pour wine into the river, chanting in a tongue you don't understand but feel deep in your ribs. You talk to the old woman who leads the ritual. Her name is Aramoria, and when you ask her where the festival comes from, she shrugs. It's always been, she says. Does even before Rome. That gives you to pause, because there's a theory among fringe historians, one you dismissed at first but now can't quite shake, that Bacchus didn't come from Greece or the East or even Etruria, that he didn't arrive at all. He emerged. The theory says that wherever people experience wild joy, grief too big to name, love that burns through reason, he appears. That Bacchus is not a god of one place, but a phenomenon, a consequence of being human. And if that's true, you're not in exile. You're in the middle of his expansion. You begin seeing signs of him in places you never expected. Not just in rites or whispers, but in the texture of the world. A masked dancer in Carthago Nova who performs in the street until he collapses, laughing. A market in Lugdunum that bursts into song after someone drops a jar of olives. A travelling band of acrobats who always paint vines on their arms and never stay in one place too long. A retired soldier who tattoos a thyrsus on his chest and says, "He saved me, not in war, in peace." And then there are the dreams. They return sharper than ever. You see the god more clearly now, though his shape still shifts. Sometimes he's a child, smiling with wine-dark lips. Sometimes he's a woman, eyes wide and golden, mouth stained with berries. Once he's a dying animal with antlers and human hands weeping tears that turn into bees. You wake shaken but exhilarated. The god is speaking, not to command, to invite. That's what makes Bacchus different, you realise. Jupiter rules, Mars demands, Saturn devours, but Bacchus seduces. He doesn't conquer, he spreads, not with violence but with rhythm, with pleasure, with grief, with permission. And what you're witnessing now across the empire is not a resurrection, it's a mutation. The cult has become something new. It no longer needs the structure it once had, rites at a certain time, initiates ranked, oaths whispered under torchlight. The god now lives in expressions, in impulses, in the flicker between restraint and indulgence. A merchant in Alexandria tells you of wine clubs forming among dock workers. Not religious exactly, but something close. They gather, drink, sing, then spend hours discussing dreams and death, and the gods that come in shadows. One man claims he saw Bacchus walk across the surface of the harbour during a storm. Another says he met a woman with a mouthful of grapes who told him his dead brother was happy now. You ask if these gatherings are organised. The merchant shakes his head. No leader. Just people who feel something. You start calling it the drift. This strange, directionless blooming of Bacchic presence. No centre, no plan, just pattern. You map it in your journals, not with place names, but with experiences. Where someone dreamed in vines, where music rose up unprovoked, where someone laughed in the face of death and felt joy instead of fear. Where control failed and love stepped in, where someone said no and then danced anyway. The map forms a constellation, not of land, of feeling, and it gets weirder. In a temple to a local river god in Dalmatia, you find a statue that looks suspiciously like Bacchus. Though it's labelled Varanthes, spirit of the flood, he's crowned with ivy, holds a broken cup. His face is carved in such a way that, from certain angles, it looks like he's smirking. You ask the priest who he really is. She just smiles. You already know. In Antioch, you sit at a tavern and hear someone sing a hymn that ends with the phrase Evui, the sacred cry of the Maenads. When you look over, the singer is a woman in Roman dress, toasting with Assyrian beer, smiling like she's keeping a secret. You don't approach, you just nod, because the secret is shared and the drift is now everywhere. Back in Rome, months later, you walk through the forum and hear someone humming that same three-note tune, a slave sweeping dust off the stones. No one notices, but you do. You turn and walk the other way, because it's working. The drift isn't loud, it doesn't need to be. It's under the surface of the empire now, weaving through dreams, jokes, songs, touches, dances, stories half remembered, and passed along like hand-me-down robes. And the god? He's not in hiding. He's travelling. Like wind, like rumour, like music played on a flute carved from bone. And everywhere he goes, someone somewhere laughs just a little too loud, weeps just a little too freely, dances just a little too wildly. And for a heartbeat, Rome trembles. You sit cross-legged on the cold floor of a makeshift study somewhere deep in the foothills north of Athens, and you're trying really hard not to fall asleep. The oil lamp flickers, that the scroll you're pretending to read is too dense to hold your interest, and the room smells strongly of mould and goat cheese. Across from you, 3 scholars are locked in what can only be described as a deeply unhinged argument about the Bacchanalia, one gesturing wildly with a quill, one furiously chewing the end of a stylus, and the third clutching a cup of wine as if it's the only thing tethering him to this realm. It's not a formal setting, nothing is written down. There are no guards, no Senate oversight, just a cave-turned academy and a group of academics, all from different provinces, who have one thing in common: they don't trust Rome's version of what happened. Livy was dramatising, Stylus Guy insists, pointing his nib toward the rafters like he's accusing the roof of historical distortion. He embellished. He moralised. He turned the Bacchanalia into a theatrical cautionary tale. "No, no," Wineclutcher counters, sloshing his cup a little too close to the edge of his scroll pile. "You're missing the symbolic layer. Livy wasn't inventing, he was mythologizing, turning fact into archetype." Quillwaver jumps in, fingers already stained with ink. And why shouldn't he? The cult was a threat. Not militarily, but philosophically, it was uncontainable. Rome couldn't catalogue it, so it burned it. You lean back against the wall, suppressing a smile. There's something oddly comforting about scholars getting this heated over something you lived. Like watching strangers argue about whether your dreams were real, and you can't blame them. It is messy. The Bacchanalia sits right at the edge of recorded history and lived myth. It refuses to be pinned down. Even now, you don't know if what you experienced was entirely real, or if the wine and the masks and the drums opened a door in your brain that's never quite closed. Someone brings you a bowl of olives and warm flatbread, which honestly is the only reason you've stayed this long, but as the debate roars on, the shape of the argument becomes clear. It isn't about the facts, not really. It's about how to explain what doesn't fit, because the rites don't fit. They never did. They didn't behave like Roman rituals. They didn't follow the rules of sacrifice and supplication. They were fluid, ecstatic, unstructured. They were about giving in, not controlling, about becoming, not defining. And scholars hate that. You finally speak up, surprising even yourself. They weren't trying to tear Rome down, you say quietly. They were trying to survive it. All three men look at you, and for a brief, miraculous moment, they all shut up. You go on, slowly, picking your words like stepping stones across a stream. The rites were chaos, yes, but not senseless, not directionless. People found meaning there, healing, power, and Rome. Rome couldn't tolerate unapproved meaning. Stylus guy blinks. But the allegations, the murder, the orgies, the treason, you shrug. Do you believe every law Rome passed was about justice? That gets them. Wineclutcher raises his cup in a silent salute. You talk late into the night, not to convince them, they're too deep in their theories for that, but to add something they're missing, the texture, the fear, the longing, the sacred absurdity of dancing until your knees gave out and then waking up under the stars with a vision still echoing behind your eyes. They scribble some of it down, most of it they'll interpret through their own lenses, classical frameworks, mythological paradigms, comparative ritual theory, and that's fine, because the point isn't to set the record straight. The point is to keep the record alive. The next day you leave the cave with a fresh scroll tucked under your arm. It's someone's attempt to chronicle the psychological utility of Bacchic frenzy. A mouthful, but insightful. You tuck it into your pack beside a half-eaten pear and a clay token marked with the vine spiral sigil. It's a weird bundle of things, but then again so are you. You start noticing just how many scholars are quietly obsessed with the Bacchanalia. Not the official ones, those with marble busts and imperial funding, but the fringe thinkers. The ones working in basements and back rooms. The ones sending coded letters to each other, using metaphors like, the harvest moon arrives early this year, or the vines twist in unexpected directions. You attend a gathering in Pergamon where people read aloud conflicting accounts of the first rites. Some claim they began with women dancing on mountaintops. Others swear it was a form of seasonal therapy, a way to process grief through catharsis. No one agrees. And that's what makes it feel Bacchic. The debate itself becomes a kind of rite, a way to engage with the god without wine or flutes or altered states. You can feel him smirking in the margins. He loves a contradiction, loves watching people try to name what won't be named. One woman stands up, holding a scroll so old the ink flakes as she speaks. What if the rites were always meant to be misunderstood? The room goes quiet. You love her immediately. Because yes, maybe that's the whole point. The Bacchanalia was never meant to be an institution. It was a mirror. And whatever Rome saw in it, perversion, rebellion, madness, was what it feared in itself. Maybe that's why the crackdown was so vicious. Not because the cult threatened to destroy Rome, but because it showed Rome its own reflection, dancing barefoot and laughing too loudly, reminding it that control is a costume, not a truth. Later, as you walk back through the olive fields under a thin silver moon, you find yourself humming that same three-note tune again, and you realise something simple but enormous. The god hasn't vanished. He's just migrated out of the groves into the grey space between history and dream. He's become a question mark at the end of every scholarly sentence. A shadow in every ritual analysis. A whisper in every manuscript that reads source unknown. He's the god of the unprovable, and that makes him immortal. The dream comes suddenly, like lightning behind your eyelids. You're lying on the floor of a crumbling temple, real world, middle of nowhere, somewhere in Illyria, and you're not expecting anything divine, just rest, just silence. But the moment you drift off, you feel the shift. The world bends inward, like breath being drawn into the lungs of something bigger than you. The stones beneath your back grow warm. The air thickens, sweet and sharp like wine left too long in the sun. You sit up, or maybe your dream self does, and realise you're not alone. He's there. Finally, not in symbol, not in story, not in masks or wine or torches. Bacchus himself, and he's nothing like the frescoes. He's not a clean-cut, toga-clad youth with a laurel crown. He's not the drunken setter from those crude plays. He's not even the golden god of frenzied maenads and singing flutes. He's all of it, and none of it. In the dream, he shifts as you look at him. Young, old, man, woman, human, beast. His skin is painted with vines that bloom and wither in the same breath. His eyes are stars. His mouth is full of laughter, not a pleasant chuckle, not courtly or calm. This is wild laughter. Laughter like a lion. Laughter like thunder. Laughter that makes the walls of your mind shake and shed their dust. And yet, his presence doesn't frighten you. It feels like recognition, like looking in a mirror you forgot existed. He says your name, not aloud, not in Latin or Greek or any language you can place, but through you. You feel your name ripple across your skin like wind in a field. And then, finally, he speaks. You came. You don't know what to say. It doesn't feel like a question, more like a gentle accusation. You want to protest, say you had no choice, say the cult pulled you in, say Rome pushed you out, but none of that matters. You did come, over and over again. He steps closer, barefoot, the ground blooming in green where his feet touch. He reaches out and places his hand over your heart, and then he says simply, "You remembered." It breaks something in you. All those years of whispering hymns in corners, of carrying scrolls in hollowed-out loaves of bread, of carving spirals into the undersides of bowls and walls and casks. All those moments where you thought you were losing something, your country, your safety, your place in the world, they weren't losses. They were offerings. You fall to your knees, but he lifts you back up with a laugh. "No kneeling," he says, now smiling with 1,000 teeth. "That's not my way." Instead, he leads you through a grove that wasn't there a moment ago. Trees dripping with fruit you can't name. Flowers that sing as you pass. Strange animals watching you with human eyes. Everything is alive. Nothing asks permission. The god walks barefoot, arms open, and the air bends around him like a lover. As you walk, he speaks, not with words again, but through the rhythm of the place. You feel his messages in your breath and bones. That madness isn't sickness. That joy is sacred. That grief is a song that just hasn't found its chorus yet. He shows you faces. Junia, dancing with fire in her hands. Albania, holding a map drawn in blood and wine. The child who sang under arrest. The boy with the lion mask who never saw the god but still believed. You see them all, those who came before you, those who stood beside you, those who will come after. And then the vision changes. You're no longer in the grove, you're in Rome, but not the Rome you remember. This is a future Rome. Cracked, older, unfamiliar. Statues missing noses, temples turned into homes, senators' names worn away from plaques, and in the streets people. Not masses, not mobs, just people. Laughing, crying, trading bread, dancing badly, telling stories, and tucked into it all the symbols, a spiral carved into a bench, a painted mask on a tavern wall, a child's drawing of a vine wrapped around a sun. He's still there, not in dominance, not in temples, in the texture of things, in memory, in laughter, in music played too loud after midnight. You turn to the god beside you. He's older now, weathered, a face like cracked stone and soft moss, and he asks you, with a tilt of his head, "Was it worth it?" You think about every moment, the fear, The joy, the betrayal, the love. The night you thought you'd die. The mornings you woke up not knowing who you were anymore, but knowing you'd never go back. You nod. He nods too. And just like that, he's gone. Not vanished. Just released. Like steam from warm bread. You wake up in the temple ruins. The sun pouring through a broken arch. The air smells of ash and thyme. Your hands are covered in dirt. Your heart is beating too fast. But you feel calm. Calmer than you've ever been, because you saw him. Not as a god to be feared, not as a memory to be mourned, but as a truth to be carried. You leave the ruins slowly. Every step feels like a drumbeat. Every breath a hymn. You pass a shepherd boy on the road. He smiles and hums a familiar 3-note tune as he walks by, and suddenly you understand the Bacchanalia was never about frenzy for its own sake. It was about freedom. Radical, inconvenient, ecstatic freedom. And the price of that freedom to remember, to keep remembering, even when the world insists on forgetting, especially then. You return to Rome not because you have to, but because you can. And that alone feels like a kind of victory. The city hasn't changed much. Its stone heartbeat still pulses through the streets, heavy with smoke, sweat, and old ambition, but you have changed. You walk differently. Your eyes no longer dart toward alley shadows, or second-guess every whispered phrase. You've travelled too far, seen too much, and danced too wildly to carry fear like that anymore. Still, stepping back into the capital feels like entering a story you thought you'd finished reading. The Senate stands, the statues watch, the rituals continue, sterile, scripted, state-approved. Priests in spotless robes intone blessings with all the passion of a dying fish. You watch a public ceremony honouring Jupiter and realise, with a twist of irony, that the crowd claps at all the wrong moments. They're bored, disconnected, reciting faith like a shopping list. But underneath that marble calm, you feel the stirrings. The drift, as you once called it, is stronger now, louder. There are more of you, the ones who remember, the ones who still hum that 3-note tune under their breath when no one's listening. The ones who plant ivy in window boxes and smile too knowingly when someone spills wine and says, Ivoe. Then one day, you receive the invitation. No words, just a sprig of laurel and a folded scrap of parchment with a familiar spiral symbol drawn in wine-red ink. The back reads, "Come to the hill when the moon is full, wear no shoes." You know exactly what it means. You don't ask who sent it. You don't need to. That night you climb the Aventine Hill in silence. The city glows below like a bowl of fireflies. The Tiber snakes through it, silver and lazy, like it too remembers better days. You walk barefoot across old stones, your feet cold but steady. You're not alone. From different corners of the city, others are making the same pilgrimage. Some you recognise from the early days. Albinia among them, older now but sharp as ever. Others are strangers, but they carry the same rhythm in their steps. At the summit, nothing waits for you, no altar, no wine jugs, no masks. Just an open space ringed by torches stuck into the dirt like sentinels, and a silence so thick you could break it over your knee. Then someone begins to sing. Not a hymn, a lullaby. Slow, low, and tender. The kind of song a mother would hum to a child born under a bad star. And the others join in. You do too. Not because you know the tune, because your body knows it. Someone starts to dance, slowly at first. Not the frenzied thrashing of the old rites. Something quieter, more grounded. A reminder, not a release. A call to memory, not madness. And in that moment, you understand. This is not a resurrection, it's a reclamation. The Bacchanalia is not being revived, it's being reborn, but not in secret groves or mountain caves. Here, in the city that tried to kill it, in the bones of the beast. You look around and realise what makes this gathering different. It's not desperate, it's not afraid, it's intentional. There are no formal rites, no priestesses in white robes, no initiations or oaths, just stories, music, laughter, sorrow, hands held in the dark, a woman weeping softly into a stranger's arms, a man whispering a prayer into a bowl of pomegranate seeds, child asleep under a cloak, a mask clutched in her fist like a toy. This is the cult now. No longer a cult at all, really. More like a movement. No one's calling it that yet, but you can feel it. This quiet uprising of soul against structure. of joy against discipline, of memory against forgetting. You speak when it's your turn, not from the centre, from the circle. You tell them about your first rite, about the wine, the music, the stars, about Junior and the fig, about the whispers in the grove, about the silence that followed. And then you say, "He never left. We did. But we found our way back." The torches flicker. The moon hangs low and fat above the city. Somewhere in the distance a dog howls, and no one is sure if it's real or part of the rite. Albinia speaks next. She talks about the archive, the scattered scrolls, the forgotten symbols scratched into the undersides of temple steps and the back of amphorae. She pulls out a tiny clay tablet, no bigger than her palm, a single spiral etched into it, a mark of survival. "This," she says, holding it up, "is our scripture now." You pass it around. Each person touches it like it's a live coal. And then, no command, no signal, you all rise and dance. No rhythm, no steps, no choreography, just movement. Old joints creaking, young feet stomping, hands flung skyward. Mouths open in laughter or sobs or hymns no longer remembered, but felt in the blood. The torches burn low, the stars blur, and for the first time in years you feel the god not as a memory or a metaphor, but present, not towering above you, demanding worship, with you, around you, as you. Later, as the sky pales and the moon slips westward, you sit with Albinia at the edge of the hill and watch the city wake. "You think they'll come for us again?" you ask. She shrugs. "Maybe, but this time they'd have to burn the whole world." And she's not wrong, because it's not a cult anymore. It's a pulse, a rhythm seeded across provinces and palaces, taverns and temples, woven into lullabies and marketplace jokes and painted on the walls of bathhouses and granaries and ships bound for the edge of the known world. You rest your head on your knees and smile. He's back, and he's not hiding. The day begins like any other, quiet, warm, and slightly hungover from the night before. The city breathes slow in the morning, like a drunk trying to pretend they've sobered up. You rise late, feet still sore from the hilltop gathering, heart full but heavy. You thought it would feel like an ending, that last rite, a final echo of something once glorious, but instead it feels like a door was opened, and something big has just stepped through, something no longer hiding. You go about your day with that strange hum in your chest, waiting for it to fade. It doesn't. By midday, whispers begin, not hushed and secret like before, but louder, bold even. A market girl tells a customer, "Did you hear about the fire on the Palatine?" A baker mutters to his apprentice, "They're saying it was them, the masked ones." And when you ask who them is, he just raises his eyebrows like you know who. You do, but you don't believe it. Not until you see the smoke, dark, thick, rising straight up from the edge of the Aventine, twisting into the sky like a warning. You run, not because you expect to help, but because you have to see, and when you reach the edge of the district, you do. A house burned to the ground, not just scotched, levelled, rubble and ash and embers still clinging to the bones of the structure. You recognise it immediately. It was one of the safe houses, a place where stories were kept, where scrolls were common, where someone once planted a fig tree that bloomed out of season. Gone. You stand with others, neighbours, strangers, maybe even fellow initiates who don't speak your name, and you all just watch, because the message is clear. Rome is still Rome, and Rome remembers. By nightfall, 2 more places are gone. A storage shed near the Circus Maximus, once used for wine smuggling, now a crater of blackened brick. A small shrine tucked in the back corner of a bathhouse, vines ripped down, offerings destroyed, the statue shattered. You meet Albinia again, this time under an aqueduct, faces shadowed by the high arch. Her eyes are tired, not scared, just resigned. "They're not trying to erase us this time," she says. "They're trying to provoke us." She's right. The strikes are surgical, symbolic. They're not looking to wipe the movement out, they want it to explode. To give them a reason to outlaw it again, to crush it officially and permanently, and for the first time in a long while you feel the heat of rage. Not the kind that burns quick and foolish, the deep, slow kind, the kind that makes you sit down and start planning. That night, the hill is called again. No invitation this time, just instinct. You and 50 others meet in the same clearing, standing in the torchlight with clenched jaws and quiet eyes. No one sings, no one dances. It's not that kind of gathering. Instead, someone reads a list of what's been destroyed. The shrines, the scrolls, the symbols carved into doorposts. A child arrested for drawing a thyrsus in the sand. A woman beaten in the forum for wearing ivy in her hair. It's all happening again, and this time you're ready. The voices rise, not in prayer, but in strategy. Plans whispered like old rites. New hiding places, new codes, new ways of spreading the rhythm without letting the authorities trace the beat. Someone suggests weapons, someone else shuts them down. Not that kind of war, they say. That's what they want. Albinia stands and speaks. Her voice is low, rough. They burned our stories, she says, so now we become them. And there it is, the shift from cult to movement, from memory to embodiment. You stay all night sketching plans into the dirt with a stick, watching them get erased by the wind and redrawn by another hand. No one takes notes, no one needs to. The god has already written it into you. By dawn the plan is in motion. You leave in pairs. Not in fear, in formation. You go out into the city not as priests, not as rebels, but as messengers. You bake spirals into bread. You hum the tune under your breath while sweeping a nobleman's porch. You press symbols into the clay of amphorae, headed to every corner of the empire. You whisper evoe into the ears of children who giggle like it's a game. You tell stories in alleyways and under bridges and in the backs of taverns. You say, there was a god once who made joy sacred. You say, there was a time when dance was prayer and madness was medicine. You say, he's not gone. You are breathing him. And the stories catch. Like fire. They say the Senate meets in emergency session. They say they can't agree on how to stop it. Some want mass arrests. Others say that's too dangerous, too visible, too late. Because the rites have passed out of hands, into voices, into being. You hear that in Britannia, a woman sings a Bacchic hymn to her sheep. In Egypt, someone carves a thyrsus into a temple's foundation stone. In Germania, a child is born with a spiral birthmark and someone whispers, he's returned. And you just keep walking, keep speaking, keep remembering. The final crackdown does come, of course. Violence always circles back. Temples are shuttered, symbols are banned, books are burned again. But it doesn't matter. Because now the cult isn't a place or a book or a person. It's a language. And it's fluently spoken in laughter, in grief, in rhythm, in risk. Rome wanted control, and the god gave you freedom. Which means Rome has already lost. You spend your final days not hiding, but watching people move a little more freely, speak a little more honestly, dance when they think no one sees them, paint spirals in chalk, sing nonsense that isn't nonsense at all. And when the time comes for you to leave, truly leave, into the final sleep, you do it under stars wrapped in a cloak of memories. You hear drums, you hear laughter, you hear the 3-note tune. And then, this last voice you hear is his, saying, well done. You've made it to the end, or maybe it's the beginning. Hard to tell with Bacchus. He was never one for straight lines. And now, lying there in the half-dark with your blanket pulled up to your chin and the echo of ancient drums still buzzing in your bones, you understand what the Bacchanalia really was. Not just a festival, not even a religion, but a rebellion with rhythm. A surrender that looked a lot like power. A reminder that sometimes the most radical thing you can do in a rigid world is laugh, or weep, or dance like no one's watching, especially if someone is. Rome tried to erase it. Burned the scrolls, banned the masks, paved over the groves with stone and law and silence. But the god knew better. He scattered himself like seeds in the wind, into lullabies, into jokes, into secret notes and shared glances and spirals drawn in dust, into you. So if you ever feel it, that pulse under your skin when the music hits just right, that rush when you speak a truth too big for words, that quiet thrill of breaking rules just by being yourself, don't fight it. That's him, and he never really left. Now, close your eyes, let the torches flicker behind your lids, let the vines curl softly in your breath, let the rhythm carry you just a little farther into sleep, the kind of sleep that remembers dreams, the kind of dreams that remember you. And if you wake in the night and hear laughter that shouldn't be there, don't be afraid. It's just Bacchus, checking in.